What's up, guys? With ICC just around the corner, we're going to be taking a look at the DPS tier set bonuses for every specialization in ICC, or tier 10. I reached out to the community and was able to bring a lot of very knowledgeable people on board for this project, which led to some amazing discussion and very insightful commentary. I did cover a few specializations on my own, but I hope you enjoy.
Hey, what's up, man?
Hey, what's going on? What's going on?
Not too much. How are you doing?
I'm doing well, dude. Pants. You have the luxury of being the first person to the tier list, so uninfluenced by, or you're not subject to the bias of other class representatives. So
that's hard. That puts so much pressure on me.
Yeah, the field is yours. But so for Shadow Priest, how are we feeling about the upcoming ICC tier sets?
Yeah. So the general consensus is Shadow Priest tier is really awesome for ICC.
Right on.
It's something that like honestly changes the way Shadow Priest should be viewed in the community because it's that good.
Really?
Yeah, so like our two piece is fine. It's pretty comparable to previous tier bonuses. It's around 200-ish DPS on single target.
Okay.
It allows our dots to crit 5% more. So on multi-targeting, it'll be a little bit more than 200 DPS, but fairly minor overall.
Okay.
Our 4-piece, however, increases the rate that our Mind Flay deals damage, so it makes it deal damage faster. And the bonus alone, not even talking about the stats that we get from the increased item level on the items, is around 1200 DPS. So it's something like the biggest.
Okay,
it's kind of insane.
Yeah, that's definitely a lot. I'm just drawing comparisons to, like, I did a kind of tier list for TGC back in the day. And I think the strongest tier set bonus that came out of that was about like 3 to 400 DPS. So that's
right.
Crazy.
Yeah, and I mean, I know like AFs, I think they get 10% damage. Like fire or mages in general just get like a crazy amount of damage from their mirror image cooldown, whatever that is. But yeah, this is something that puts Shadow on the map in terms of single target DPS. Whereas like, honestly, your Shadow's single target DPS has been like the pain point in raids. Like you feel kind of bad bringing a Shadow Priest. Like it deals more damage than like your Boomy. It's kind of around Ellie Shaman, but like it was never a class that you were really excited to bring. Maybe on Algalon, of course.
Yeah.
But this is something that allows it to actually compete with every single other class. Now, the sims show it not simming as high as Fire Mage or Fury Warrior, but it's right in that same ballpark. And, it's something where, like, I don't know that it changes anything in, like, a world first perspective, people going for Lich King, because obviously you're not going to have your tier bonuses by then.
Yeah.
And for speed running, it's really hard because, yes, you'll have this bonus, but Fire Mages are going to be so dominant that I'm not quite sure that Shadow really hops them and becomes a stackable class. But I think for everybody like just below that like world first level, this is crazy good. Should change the perception around Shadow Priest and makes the class worth stacking, honestly.
Hell yeah. Right on. Dang. I have seen some like images or sims floating around that shows Shadow Priest scaling really or very well into this final phase of ICC. And the tier set bonus, it seems like it plays a pretty big role in that.
Yeah, I mean, the gear is also just crazy well itemized. It's the first time we don't need like crit spirit gear or something. Like every single item outside of the items that have hit on them are just like perfectly statted. So that tied into a crazy strong tier bonus just really allows Shadow to see its full potential. It's basically the same thing that happened in like Sunwell pre-patch, where it's just like, you get all these confluences of the updated talents, the updated scaling, and then having like a shit ton of haste and crit from all of that gear in Sunwell.
Right. Okay. So knowing that, is there so you're currently rocking tier 9 in basically you're running 2 or 4 piece. Sorry, I'm not Shadow Priest player. Not really sure what that looks like right now for tier 9.
So a true Bis setup has 4 pieces of tier 9.
Okay.
Though like if you were running 2-piece tier 8, 2-piece tier 9, you'd be like, I think it's like 30 or 50 DPS below a full Bis setup, assuming you had full Bis in that 2-piece setup. Like our tier 9 2-piece bonus or 4-piece bonus is really, really bad. It's still good in the sense that the 258 bonuses pretty much carry, or the items carry with their stats.
Yeah.
But it's very shit.
Gotcha. Okay.
Keep it simple.
Okay. So it sounds like then you're basically trying to get your hands on this tier 10 as soon as possible. There's not really any reason to hold out on the 4 set, or maybe is there a reason to hang on to 2 set for a little bit when you're kind of gearing up?
No, I think I think it depends what kind of guild you're in. If you expect to be getting 277s week 1, week 2, I think I did some simming, and it seemed like just replacing one of your tier slots, like losing your tier 9 4-piece bonus and replacing it with one of the good 277 items is a DPS increase. So if you can just get a good 277 item in one of your tier slots, even though you lose that 4-piece tier 9 bonus, it's still going to be a DPS upgrade, assuming you have the gear to make your hit work.
Right.
Okay. So it's something that, replace it immediately, get some tier, do your daily heroic every single day, do all of the quests. Just you want to buy that tier as fast as you can.
For sure. Right on. Okay. So with that all said and done, Pants, where does Shadow Priest fit on this tier list? Where would you put it?
So this is hard because I think everything I've said definitely puts it. I'm assuming gas is like the best.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
like
gas
that's just
top. Yeah.
The only reason I want, and I think this is probably Shadow Priest scaling, or like Shadow Priest just relative to other classes, is that like it doesn't make Shadow a class that you stack really for anything if you're in a world first scenario. If you're like one of the top 5 guilds in either progression or speedrunning, obviously progression you're not going to have it. Speedrunning, I don't think it puts you above like fire mages are just so cracked for Lich King that's the only fight that's really going to matter, that you're not going to be replacing them with Shadow Priest. I think for the other 99.999% of people, this is gas. So like I have to put it in that category because I think for like the majority of players, this is just insanely good. And it makes Shadow a class that like not only do you not feel bad bringing, you could have 18 of them in a raid and do perfectly fine if they have this 4-piece.
Hell yeah. All right, word. Pants, you got anything else you want to add then before we move on?
I guess like the final thing I'd say is that like this set, I'd say one of the problems with it is that it makes Mind Flay so good that there are points depending on your haste and spell power that you don't cast Mind Blast. So if you're someone who really enjoys the Shadow playstyle, I think that this is going to make you enjoy it more because it's faster. It feels more rewarding if you're good at it. But if you're someone who like rerolled and you don't really enjoy it and you're just kind of helping your guild out because I needed a Shadow Priest, you're probably going to enjoy playing it less, I'd have to say. So I think that's something for most people to take into account as well.
Okay, word. Good to know.
But yeah, that's all I got for you.
Awesome. Pence, thank you. Appreciate your time, man. That's it.
Yep, no problem. Thanks for having me.
No, we'll see you around.
See you.
Hello.
Yo, what's going on?
Yo, one shot. Not too much, man. Thanks for joining me today, dude. How are you feeling about the Hunter tier set? So you're in a bit of a unique situation, at least up to this point, as you're gonna be covering multiple Hunter specs. So you got BM, which is, I mean, a spec for sure, marksman, and survival. Maybe we can start with survival. But what are your thoughts on the ICC tier 10 set bonuses, and maybe how do those compare with tier 9? What do you think?
Yeah, sure. I guess starting with the 2-piece for survival, it's a pretty good DPS upgrade from our 2-piece tier 9. The serve 2-piece is simming at like 420 DPS on a 360-second time.
Right on.
And yeah, I think it's pretty good like compared to that. In terms of in single target, it's like really good, but once cleave and AoE scenarios are like involved, it kind of gets a little bit worse because it's really only like it's purely a single target tier bonus with the way it works, because it only procs off our auto shot.
Still a lot of damn there from it, so that sounds pretty solid for sure.
Yeah, pretty substantial upgrade from our tier 9 2-piece.
Right on. Yeah, I guess that has to be pretty good. Although your tier 9 2-piece is also like quite good, so you'd want to rush it. But then I guess would running like two-piece tier 9 and two-piece tier 10 be the move for like a period?
Yeah, it's a bit tricky as survival because ideally with like the first piece of gear that we want to replace, we want to replace our off-piece gear with tier to kind of get that like jump start so that we can have tier 9 2-piece and tier 10 3-piece so that we aren't dropping our 2-piece like early on and that we're swapping it out with tier 10 4-piece.
Right. How are we feeling about the 4-piece?
The 4-piece, it's not as big as of an upgrade compared to the 2-piece. It's about like 160 DPS for serve, but it does it's pretty unique because it definitely does get a lot stronger when cleave and AoE is involved because and we're still going to be multi-dotting as well with the 4-piece to keep uptime, as much uptime as possible on it, because it's a 5% chance on every Serpent Sting tick to proc.
Right. I guess no ICD there. Just
Yeah,
keeps feeding
no
into
ICD
itself.
no ICD on both of them, I think.
Yeah, okay. How many? I mean, as a player somebody that doesn't really play Hunter, like so when if you're in an AoE situation and you're multi-dotting Serpent Sting, how many Serpent Stings are you putting up, or until it's like, all right, I don't want to put any more Serpent Stings, or do you ever even get to that point?
We do, but I think it requires a lot of targets. Usually for me, like when there's that much like cleave and AoE going on, it's usually like 3 or 4 targets is like the max that I'll multi-dot, and then I will start volleying once we get to like 4 to 5 plus targets.
Gotcha. Okay. So, I mean, we see Shadow Priest is the only one on the list here. Right? You're coming in second, having to slot in the Hunter somewhere. So Shadow Priest tier set, absolute gas. The 2 and 4 set are pretty bonkers. So where we kind of feel in survival? How does survival fall in this this tier list? Are we feeling good? Are we decent? Are we down in the swamp? I mean, from you described, there's no way it's that bad, but
Yeah, it's definitely not. I don't know. It's so hard. Because I don't have that much to compare to, and like the 2-piece and the 4-piece gap for S Priest is just so huge.
it
I
is.
would. It's like I want to put it in feeling good.
Okay.
Um,
We can always come back to it later if you like end up changing your mind too. Feeling good?
yeah, I
All
think
right.
that'd be good. Yeah, but I
So,
think for right now, I would say feeling good. Yeah, Honey's in a pretty good spot.
okay, cool. All right, well, what about Marksman? How are you feeling about Marksman?
Marks, it's relatively the same. It's a little bit better. Um, at 450 DPS for the 2-piece
Okay.
at the same time duration. So I would say just off that. And for like holding tier 9 as much as possible, it's and like AoE and cleave, it's basically the same as serve. So I would put MM like right behind serve, I'd say.
Okay.
And feeling good.
Feeling good. All right. Hunters are feeling good. Hell yes.
Yeah, with our tier 10 4-piece, we definitely want to still multi-dot. I feel like it would be a DPS loss in terms of Serpent Sting damage, but it would be like a gain
Oh,
all around.
it's like you're oh what's it funnel. That's the term. You're funneling. So like you
Yeah,
do more quote unquote single target damage or more effective damage into a target when you have other targets you can like multi-dot and maintain Serpent Sting uptime.
yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Just to keep the buff up as long as possible.
For sure. Right on. Okay. All right, cool. So feeling good about the hunter specs. BM hunter. If there are, so if you're trying to raid ICC and maybe heroic ICC, you're probably not playing BM. But for the few people that might be watching this video and think, I love playing BM and this is my spec. What can our BM hunters plan for?
Um, ho- Honestly, since this is like purely a tier set uh video, I think BM is like the same as Serve and MM, maybe in like a decent tier because it's for like BM, it's around 350 DPS for the 2-piece, so it's a little bit lower than MM and Serve, and the 4-piece is also a little bit lower by like 30 DPS at 113. So actually, I would say BM would be in decent.
Decent. Okay. I mean, and
It's a little bit worse, yeah.
Yeah, and those numbers aren't necessarily surprising. BM just does so much less damage as a spec.
Yeah.
So that definitely makes sense. So a decent. I mean, I'm feeling pretty good about that. I know when I in the TOGC video I did for BM, I was looking at kind of the relative percent DPS gain. And I ended up putting BM above the other hunter specs, despite doing like vastly less DPS, just because that percent difference was so high. But yeah, if you happen to be a BM hunter, the tier is good for you. You get slightly less actual value than the other hunter specs, but it's something. So
Yeah. Yeah, and I think BM will still multi-dot as well, even with the 4-piece. The same as all the other specs.
gotcha. Right on. All right, cool. One shot. Is there kind of anything else you'd want to add or toss in here before we move on?
No, I think that's good, but feel free to, reach out if like all the other specs have been ranked and I can maybe
You
move up or
come
move
back
or
and
move
change your
move
ranking
down.
later. I mean, if I allow
Yeah,
you to do that, then I gotta allow everyone else to do that. So I mean,
sure, yeah.
we'll see, we'll see. But all right, no word. One shot, man. Thanks for your time. Appreciate you linking up, and we'll talk to you again later, dude.
I mean, peace.
See you.
Yo.
Hello.
Hey,
Go. How you doing?
good man, good. Good to hear back from you.
Right on, dude. Yeah, thanks for joining me for the a look at the Boomkin tier sets here. So, what can you tell us about them?
The the 2-set bonus is kind of interesting, and there's like more and more ways that people are coming up with to take advantage of it. And the bonus is when you gain clear casting from your Omen of Clarity talent, you deal 15% additional nature and arcane damage for 6 seconds. So
Right.
there's a couple ways that we have to like guarantee clear casting procs. One way is like gift weaving or flower shifting, as like the feral community calls it. This where
Interesting.
you buff your Mark of the Wild for the raid, and it's like 99% chance to give you an omen proc. So then there's that GCD, so you're really only getting like 4.5, 4.7 seconds, and you're losing that GCD. So like while you're casting, not really that great, but like pre-pull is a big thing. In between phases, like right before the next phase starts, you can gift weave again, whatever you want to call it.
Right.
And
It's like, if I'm understanding you correctly here, it's like whenever there's forced downtime, it's a really good value global, or like, especially if there's maybe fights with movement and you have to get from like point A to point B, it's a good thing to press kind of on the way there, if I understand that correctly.
yeah, so one of our dots insect swarm and moonfire. So for ICC, I'm going to be keeping insect swarm up and then moonfiring when I move. So if there's like more movement after I have both dots up, then I could like, hey, get a omen proc with
Gotcha.
throwing the gift out there, and then as soon as I'm stopped and positioned, then I'll have a couple seconds to have a little extra damage.
Right, right.
And
Is
this is
there
it's also going to be used for like AoE a lot. So if you glyph Typhoon and it doesn't knock back,
Mhm.
then this is really going to help for trash, because it's almost again like a guaranteed omen proc with Typhoon if there's enough targets. If there's like 6+ targets, I often see like an omen proc. So it's like Typhoon, the trash pack, into either Starfall if it's not on cooldown,
right?
and then Hurricane. So our hurricanes are going to be pumping on trash.
So Typhoon, like the chance for the Omen proc depends on like it increases the amount of mobs that you hit with your Typhoon.
It has the same chance per target that it hits. So the more targets, the better chance you
Right.
have.
Okay. Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's really powerful for AoE then.
Yeah. So 15% extra damage for our hurricanes, pretty much.
Right on for sure. And then Starfall when you have it up. Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. Okay. Is this is actually kind of interesting. So is it worth fishing for procs during in your like if you're just standing still like blasting the boss, or no, it's not worth the global to like get the buff from like say flower weaving or pressing mark. You'd rather just like maintain your normal rotation.
Yeah, just maintain the normal rotation. But the new thing that I just learned about was melee weaving, if you want to call it that. Druids, we love weaving.
Yeah.
So instead of like, we'll keep our normal rotation, but be like in the melee range, just like we're a melee, and have start attack macros built into our spells. And then during our GCDs with enough haste, we'll be able to like get melee swings.
Wait,
Which can
really?
proc Omen.
So
And-
melee Boomkin. Okay, that's
Yeah,
that's
kind of.
sweet.
It's like nothing else that you have to do. We just have to be very careful being in melee range.
Okay.
And it's like we have to get to like 1,000, a little over 1,000 haste before we'll really be able to get that melee in without having to, stop our rotation just to get a melee swing.
Right. Okay.
But that
interesting.
one's a lot less chance to proc, so it's like you might not see too many clear casting procs from that, but it's enough for me to want to get in there in that melee range and try it.
I think it's always fun when a tier set can kind of like changes the way you play too. It's not just like a flat like, oh, your nature damage, your nature spells do like 5% more damage. It's like, cool, nothing really changed about my rotation. So that's pretty interesting.
Oh yeah.
Okay, so that's the 2 set there. Do you know what like the DPS gain from the set bonus in particular is?
So going from tier 9, like 4-piece, going to 2-piece tier 9, 2-piece tier 10 with like the lowest 2-piece tier 10, and it was still about 200 like extra DPS.
Okay.
So like we're starting off
interesting.
immediately. As soon as we can get 2-piece tier 10, we should be making that swap.
Right, and that's so you're basically that's like you're going 7 eye levels down from the Regalia 258 gear to 251 2-piece. Like that's just how powerful it is. Interesting. Wow. Okay.
Yep.
So how are we feeling about the 4 set then?
4 set kind of just makes us like a fire mage. It's like ignite for fire mage. So our critical strikes from Starfire and Wrath cause our target to languish for an additional 7% of our spell's damage for 4 seconds.
Okay.
So that one's kind of, to me, a little bit boring, but also kind of cool because hopefully it's like more numbers popping up on the screen.
Right. And I guess it probably increases the value of critical strike chance for the class, maybe not by a significant amount, but so to your knowledge and understanding of the Boomkin class, how are you feeling about the Boomkin tier 10 set bonuses going into ICC? Are you is it gas? Are you feeling good? Is it down in the swamp? I mean, I don't think it's down in the swamp based on what you described so far.
I would have to go with not gas, but feeling good.
Okay.
The 4-piece could be a little bit more interesting, and since it's not like as interesting as the 2-piece, but 2-piece just seems really, really fun. So yeah, I'm feeling great about the 2-piece and kind of okay about the 4-piece.
Right on. Actually, another thing too that I forgot to mention, but I was thinking about. So when I did the tier list I did a similar look at set bonuses for tier 9 TOGC set bonuses, and the Boomkin tier sets like bonuses specifically are actually very powerful for the class. Like I think they're the second most powerful in the raid tier if you're just looking at like the percent damage gain from the tier set bonuses. So the fact that like both the 2 and 4 set from the tier 9 set bonuses, to my understanding, are very powerful. So the fact that you're just immediately gunning for that 2 set in ICC, I feel like that has to speak volumes about just the power level from that set bonus alone.
Yeah, so for me, the tier 9 4-piece wasn't too great because it's increased the damage done by your Starfire and Wrath by 4%. So that one was like even more boring to me than like the Languish one that we're getting in tier 10.
Right.
But yeah, the 2-piece again for tier 9 was pretty cool. Moonfire now has a chance for its dot to be a crit, and that was really, really fun to switch to after coming out of like Oldawar.
Yeah, that's a good point. I guess speaking with respect to like specifically the damage values of the 4 set bonus, like it wasn't necessarily fun to play, but it just did a lot for the class. But the fact that 2 set is both, really strong and fun to play is definitely something Boomies have to look forward to. So awesome.
Yep.
Boomkins are feeling good. Go, is anything else you want to add there before we call it?
No, I'm happy with that, man. That was pretty cool. Yeah.
All right, right on, dude. That's it then. I appreciate your time. Thanks for joining me today, and I'll catch you around, dude.
Yeah, man. Thanks. See you, Jen.
No, peace. Hello.
Hey, hello.
Yo, Louki. How you doing, man?
Good, good. How you doing?
I'm doing well. Thanks for joining me today, dude.
Yeah, I mean it's pretty late in the night for me by now, but we should be good.
Right on. Well, hopefully, still got the brain power to explain through these Warlock tier sets for me. So, Louki, what can you tell me about the Warlock tier set bonuses for each of the specs? And feel free to start with whatever spec you feel like.
Yeah, like just in general, the specs do not have separate bonuses.
Mhm.
Basically, the tier set bonuses are shared between all specs, and they perform a little bit differently depending on how each spec plays and
Right.
well what each spec's role is in the raid, right? A little bit of a disclaimer, I don't know that much about Destro since I've never played it and I only, well, briefly looked at most of the Destro stuff, so take that with a bit of a grain of salt.
For sure.
But I've been a long time demo player, so I can give a lot of context here, and well, F is probably one of the most researched and well understood specs in the game right now, so I should be pretty safe here as well, I think.
Right on.
Okay, so starting with the tier sets themselves, the first bonus, the 2-piece, is basically ignorable and not very interesting. It's basically just a slight crit bump to our main damaging abilities,
Mm-hmm.
which are, well, Shadowbolt, Incinerate, and Corruption, and for demo specifically also of interest is Soulfire, which is our execute ability.
Right.
In like you only really notice that bonus for each of those specs in the sim. It doesn't really impact your play all that much, so the most interesting part is probably the 4-piece bonus, which it's interesting. Let's start like this, and I think it's best this is the point where we start treating the specs separately.
Okay,
because
so
it,
sure.
because at this point it's just very different across those specs.
All right, so 2 set for
Starting-
all the specs is but 4 set is where
Yeah.
things get interesting. Okay, so talk me
Exactly,
through it then.
Okay, so yeah, the 4 set basically gives you a small chance, 50%, on each of your main dots, which is Immolate for Destruction and Demo, and Unstable Affliction for, well, Affliction,
Mhm.
to gain a 10% damage boost. The notable part of this is, of course, that this has no ICD, but instead a small proc chance. So
Interesting.
what happens is that, well, as you add more targets to an encounter which you can dot, and well, as long as the dot is not wasted, you have a higher chance to proc it.
Right.
So Destro does not really gain all that much from the bonus. It's a safe bonus. It's
Mhm.
decent, but it's a very stable spec. It doesn't really pop off an execute. It has no particular cooldowns. It
Yeah.
doesn't really interact with the mechanic much. So it's just decent. It doesn't change a lot. It's a good bonus, basically.
Okay.
So yeah, Destro would probably be decent tier.
Decent. All right.
Yeah. Also, somewhat, of course, Destro isn't really a popular rating spec at the moment. It has some applications, for example, on Sorfang. You'll probably see it used by some raids, but in general, it's, well, as I said, not the most popular, mostly because it has to compete with Affliction.
Right. And something I'll
Now-
actually add to that too is I know we're going through all the specs here. I mean, you'll notice that there's a Beast Mastery hunter on here, but you don't see a whole lot of BM hunters. I do feel like Destro is probably a more popular kind of off-meta spec for a lot of people. Like some people just kind of enjoy the playstyle and will play, especially in kind of more casual guilds and settings. And honestly, it's like it's okay. I mean, the choice
I think
between
the people that play
ahead.
Destro absolutely love Destro and don't want to play Affliction. um,
Yeah, okay. I know somebody like that. Yeah.
yeah, right. And I can't fault them for it. Like if you like the spec, you like the spec.
For sure.
And So me putting it into decent next to BM is probably the same reason why, well, BM is there. It's just that it's less popular and it's less hyped. But I think for the people actually playing Destro and being hyped about playing Destro, it would be a tier higher. But yeah, that's just my general gut feel based on ranking it next to Affliction.
Oh, fair enough. Okay.
Okay. So yeah, I think this is all I can say about Destro. Maybe a quick thing about a cleave damage or AoE damage. Multi-dotting isn't that large part of the Destro, rotation or playstyle. So it doesn't really gain a large boost for Destro. In general, Immolate is the highest damage per cast time spell.
Okay.
It does occasionally suffer from GCD capping issues, but it's whether you multi-dot or not, it's not that large of a difference, I think, as it is for both Demo and Affliction, which care about this much more.
Okay. Sure. Why don't we take a look at Affliction and Demo, and we can always come back to Destro if we
Yeah, exactly.
want.
So then I think let's continue with Demo.
Okay.
So for Demo, this is really interesting because for Demo, the damage you add to the raid is distinct from the damage you dealt by yourselves, because the raid buff of Demo is scaled by the gear Demonology Warlock wears,
Right.
and any kind of DPS increase always needs to take into account the setting and raid you're in.
Yeah.
And all of the gearing advice we give is mostly based on the assumption that you're in a 25-man raid, which runs 10 casters, where casters isn't, strictly specified which casters, just in general 10 casters. And
Okay.
this would mean that 1 SP, so 1 spell power you share Surya buff, is worth roughly 23 DPS across the whole raid. So this is
Wow.
the basic assumption we rank gear by, right? This is
Okay.
a high number.
That's up there.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you basically end up doubling your damage. So your personal DPS contribution in top tier ICC gear would be 14 to 15k, depending on some factors, and your raid buff would add another 15k to this. So you roundabout you'd add 30k damage to your raid.
Right.
So this is very important to consider, especially when you're moving from T9 gear to ICC gear. And for them in particular, this means that the item level 251 tier set is not actually an upgrade in general. It's going for 2-piece, so basically T9 2-piece and T10 2-piece is a very small downgrade. It basically shifts some of the damage you add to your raid back to yourself. And the 4-piece bonus is a very good bonus for Demo, but the item level loss is so huge and the item stat distribution is so awkward for Demo that you lose a lot of damage by going with the 4-piece over the T9 258 item level variant. Yes. So it's a bit awkward. I would recommend swapping over to the 4-piece once you've gotten at least 2 normal mode 25 items, so 2 items at item level 264 and 2 at 251. This is the numerical break-even point.
For dropping the tier 9 2-set bonus?
For dropping the tier 9 2-set bonus, exactly. It's not so much about the bonus in particular, the bonus is decent, but just the tier 10 set itself is crit, haste, spell power, or crit, hit, spell power. And what's notably missing is Spirit, which for Demo Warlocks translates to spell power, which is shared with the raid, right?
Okay,
so that's just the logic behind it.
Gotcha.
And there is a notable curiosity for Demo Warlocks in particular, which crops up every single tier so far, which is just not wearing tier set at all, but wearing only off-piece items. Since you can just take all of the hard mode items, put them on, and to the large stat increase and, adding back in Spirit, you, gain a lot of raid damage, but lose a lot of damage yourselves.
Yeah.
And yeah, just to quickly value this appropriately, if you get all 5 slots fitted out with the best 277 off pieces, you would gain about 800 to 900 rate DPS in total.
Okay.
One of these items is super contested, which are the Plaguebringer Stained Pants, which is, I think, the best in slot for most casters except mages. I might be a bit wrong on this. I didn't fact check this. You'd also wear the Blood Queen Spirit Gloves, and then you take 3 more items which aren't very contested at all. But you'd still gain a lot, and the set itself would just numerically end up being equal to a standard 4-piece tier set at 2 heroic mode items and 2 normal mode items. So this is a lot to take in. To briefly summarize this for most people, if you're really pushing hard the first 2 weeks and you're unlikely to get 4 set for your demo Warlock, this could be an interesting option. In all other cases, it's probably not worth it.
Okay.
And well, yeah.
So just to recap, so I understand everything there. An option for a demo lock is just rushing kind of high eye level, uncontested, high spell power items rather than kind of run the 4 set bonus if you are able to get a hold of those pieces.
Yes, exactly.
Okay. And then I mean, you might be heading this direction, but let's say if you're tending towards kind of full BIS, is there a conversation where a demo warlock like doesn't run their 4 set bonus in favor of pieces that are just like raw spell power and maybe spirit like statted? Because I know you mentioned that a lot of the tier has like hit and crit.
So again, this is just purely numbers, right?
Yeah.
Just comparing the basically patchwork fight, which in that form doesn't really exist in Icecrown. But
fair.
In a full BIS scenario, where your whole raid is fitted out in BIS items, and your demo log has all of the options available, you would only tend to the 0-piece solution if your raid has 15 casters or more.
Gotcha.
So it's considerably stacked.
All right, so if this is like the heroic Lich King speed kill strat of stacking like 24 fire mage or 23 fire mages in 1 demo lock in a tank.
Yeah, more or less, exactly.
Okay.
So basically, if your intention is to skip phases by stacking fire mages and hoping that this works similarly to other realms, then yeah, this could be a good option.
Okay.
But unless you're doing that, it's more or less not that great. I just wanted to emphasize it's an option.
Gotcha.
So coming back to the actual tier and why I think it should generally be rated higher than its pure numeric value is that demo actually gains a lot from multi-dotting or basically cleave scenarios. And the bonus itself is pretty nice. And on the hardest fights, we will have this tier, which are, mostly Lich King, of course. But then a good step above that is Patricide and Zundragoza. At least on Patricide, on Lich King, it performs very well since there's a lot of cleave damage you can meaningfully do.
Right.
Most notably the Raging Spirits and the Valkyries, right?
Mm-hmm.
And in those cases, it's very likely you're proccing this bonus more often than normal, and you can meaningfully snapshot more of the dot damage. You can stack your cooldowns into it, and this just adds up. And I would say, if your goal is to kill Lich King at a reasonable pace, you would probably favor the 4-piece solution. If you're going for like the week 2 kill, then I don't know, split as hard as possible in week 1. Put all of the random off-piece trash you find on your demo log, and then it is probably better than waiting for his 2-piece or whatever.
Interesting. It's pretty cool how like the kind of what raid situation you're in would like that would influence how you would gear as a demo log. That's pretty fascinating.
Yeah. Yeah, it's very difficult to cover in the talk, right? But the
I appreciate you,
the Lockhart,
giving me the spark
yeah,
notes for sure.
yeah, the Lockhart has a nice sheet made by .me. He's called in Lockhart,
Okay.
which which basically allows you to get an idea of what the appropriate evaluation of one spell power on this buff is for your raid. I can just send you the link afterwards, and if you want to, you can add it into the video description if you feel it's appropriate.
Yeah, definitely.
But the basically the big secret of demo logs is that there isn't actually a strict BIS, because your raid influences your evaluation of what spell power is worth so much
Right.
that it's just a difficult pick. Oh, and to add to this, in 10-man, you obviously tend to the more personal DPS choices because there's just less people available, right?
Yeah, fair.
Okay, so let's rank this then.
That's tough.
Yeah, that's tough, right? So it's either in the I don't care at all, or it's in the this is really a nice bonus and I'm happy whenever I see it proc and I like reacting to it and playing into it. And
Okay.
I think it's more in the reacting and playing into it. So
Yeah.
I would put it next to feeling good.
Okay.
But just always have this caveat in mind that you can just skip it in the appropriate scenario.
I mean, something we could do based on this tier set bonus and kind of unique situation for a demo. I mean, we could I could make a new tier.
The demo row, yeah.
Yeah,
I think it's fine. It's fine. Tier
Okay.
lists are mostly like to facilitate discussion, right?
For
So
sure.
you got a lot of discussion. Anyone who's interested can hear me ramble on about it.
So before we move on to Affliction, one question I had about as a demo, or if I was to play demo in a situation. I have an alt Warlock. Sometimes I've dabbled in demo. Let's say there's like a multi-dawning scenario where you're running the 4P set bonus. I imagine does that change kind of the breakpoint for the number of targets it's kind of worth putting Immolate into versus like maybe just slamming Seed or something?
Yeah, I think that's basically the choice you have to make. Generally speaking, in most cases, it's worth putting Immolate first before you start seeding. It's an incredibly strong dot, but the caveat is that it's a very long duration dot too. And this means you just need to figure out whether the target will survive long enough. This is really something you would have to check in logs afterwards.
Gotcha.
My gut feeling on Putricide is that there isn't really a good place to use Seed on. So there's at most 3 adds alive. There is a bit of a discussion whether you can actually meaningfully dot all 3 of them during the transition. But for the most part, Immolate would be your choice there, right? And for Lich King, I do not have any practical experience. What I saw mostly leads me to believe that you would Immolate all of the Valkyries if they push down. And depending on how many you got, and let's hope it's not all of them, you would seed to or try to snipe Soulfire and burn a single one down. This depends on a lot of factors.
Cool. Okay. I guess we can move on to Affliction.
Sure.
Rockin'.
Yeah, so if you thought I would ramble a lot about demo, wait for Affliction 4-piece discussion.
All right, hit me with it. I'm ready.
Okay. So a big part of the Affliction playstyle is to snapshot corruption. And a very important fact of snapshotting corruption is that bonus damage effects are retained. So you can snapshot them.
Yep.
And since this is a bonus damage effect, you can snapshot this bonus onto corruption, and it's a huge fucking deal. Sorry, huge deal.
You're good.
So it's a big deal to snapshot this thing. And in general, so on average, on a patchwork fight, this is a really good bonus. It's like 300-ish DPS, which translates to, 2 big upgrade items basically on its own. Yeah, and this bonus gets better and better the more gear you have. And on some encounters, you can just keep corruption alive for a long time.
Yeah.
The problem is it's a low percentage chance to proc the effect on your second priority dot, which ticks every 3 seconds. So this whole snapshotting thing means you need to get lucky to be able to snapshot it early.
Okay.
And this kind of contributes a bit to this feels bad effect, where your expectation is that you get this proc early and you can snapshot it and you can play your, Affliction Warlock gameplay that you've gotten used to. But the reality is that even after one full dot duration, you only have, it's basically a coin flip. You have a 55% chance to proc it. After 2, so after 30 seconds, it's only 80%. And after 45 seconds, basically, most of the encounter is like you're out of lust at that point.
Yeah.
You're still left with a 10% chance of not having procced it. And this is kinda contributes to bad feelies. Let's say it like this.
All right. Yep. I can see that.
Now it gets even worse. Because you play rogue, right? I think I checked out your stream and I saw a yellow bar.
Yeah. Main rogue. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So you're aware of the whole tricks a warlock for his snapshot thing.
Yep.
Yeah. So rogues get their 2-piece, which makes them want to use tricks for their own DPS now, which is neat. And locks now need you to wait to use it.
Until they get that proc. I see. Okay.
Yes. So basically, it gets worse. And I talked with Wefro a bit about this privately.
Okay.
And it's still really, really good to tricks Warlocks. It's like a 600-ish DPS increase in these 3-minute patchwork fights to stack both of these effects. On average, that is. So it can be more, it can be less.
Yeah.
And this just puts you in a really annoying spot where you kind of have to annoy your rogue to wait. And if they use it and you get a proc, it's bad. And if they give tricks to you at a bad time, you cannot actually use it for what you wanted it to, you want to use it for. So yeah, it's very awkward.
Essentially, what you're telling me is that all the rogue and warlock relationships in ICC will be heavily strained. So that's good to know.
I think I would say you want to foster a good relationship with your rogues as a warlock.
Okay.
Not necessarily for your pass, right? Tricks doesn't count for your pass, so you don't care. But I think what you need your rogue or rogues to do is for every tricks opportunity they have, they want to check in your raid somehow, like use a nice weak aura, whether one of these procs is active.
Right.
So if you run 5 warlocks, the chances are that one of them will have the proc active. It's basically 100%. The single one will have it active. So you just need to talk to them, tell them, well, if I see you have the buff and I tricks you, I want you to use it meaningfully for corruption. That's basically the best solution we got, but it's an awkward scenario, and basically you need to figure out on a per encounter basis how you deal with this.
Right. Is there, so, I mean, there can be, as you were talking about before, because of the low proc chance, there's a fairly decent possibility or likelihood that you don't get the 4-piece proc early on in the fight. And, especially if you're running, I'm not exactly sure what Warlock Bis is, but maybe either when you're working towards gearing to that, if you have any chance on hit trinkets that likely proc like close to the start of the pull, is there inherent value to pressing tricks on pull with these trinket lineups? Because if you don't get the proc and you wait for it and your trinkets fall off, you're losing some potential damage. I mean, a 10% damage modifier is pretty significant, so maybe that just outweighs any trinkets, but maybe you can swing to that.
I can't give you exact numbers because there's still some stuff that we need to figure out with the sim APL to just adequately represent different scenarios of when and where and in what scenario you get tricks, right?
I see.
But the corruption is worth between 25% to up to 45% of a Affliction Warlock's damage over the whole fight. And getting the single snapshot and maybe a second one at 35% is basically the big deal and why you want to trick them.
Gotcha.
The trinkets themselves don't snapshot. They're basically, with one exception, they're basically all SP trinkets, and SP doesn't snapshot.
Okay.
The one notable exception is also added in this phase. It's the Never Melting Ice Crystal from Pit of Sauron, I think.
Okay.
And it basically gives you 1k crit chance, which you can snapshot, which is ridiculous. And it's a good trinket. It's not as good as the top tier raid trinkets, but it is very good on the encounters you can meaningfully snapshot on. And again, this contributes to the whole issue of now wanting to snapshot with the 4-piece bonus.
Yeah.
But to summarize this on a single target Petrock fight, there's basically now a lot of micromanagement and RNG added for a mechanic that isn't even that fun. So on single target fights, this is just kind of on the fact that it's so good, still just
not great to play.
Yeah,
around.
like I already know that Fastergut and Sorfang won't be my favorite fights, purely based on the fact that this is a thing.
Yeah.
But now comes the but, which is why I think it's still a fun set bonus and a very good one at that, is that it works very well with multi-dotting. And any opportunity you have to multi-dot with UA makes it a very reliable proc. And again, for the difficult encounters this phase, like Putricide and Lich King, you will be able to multi-dot a lot. And then reliably gain this bonus, which means you can reliably snapshot corruption on single target, and you deal a truckload of damage.
Yeah.
And this is nice, right? Especially because Warlocks are already so good for Lich King. They basically play their own game in this encounter, and the 4-piece just adds to, well, how good this encounter feels as a luck. You're basically waiting for everyone else to, well, mess up. But this is not the fun part, but it's a cool fight for Locks.
For sure.
And Putricide is too. It's also kind of decent on Lady Deathwhisper. I didn't play this as Affliction Lock, so I can't say whether you want to multi-dot with UA, but I would expect you to. And again, in this case, it's a relatively reliable way to snapshot stuff.
For sure. And I have an alt warlock that I messed around with a little bit on the PTR and didn't do the entire raid on it, but I will speak to the variety of the types of fights in ICC make for a lot of very different types of like Affliction Lock gameplay, which I think is, really like a really fun thing. I mean, you have, rather sometimes, less than fun lineups on single target encounters, especially if you don't get the 4-piece proc at an ideal time, but you have these multi-dotting fights where with different numbers of adds and the encounters you listed, like Lady Deathwhisper, Putricide, Lich King, where your kind of priority of which buttons you're pressing, from corruption to UA to seed even, will vary depending on kind of the scenario. So I feel like that side of gameplay is like really fun. So at least that's exciting.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think Affliction is a very good spec to mess around with. High ceiling, lots of opportunities to do stuff. You get a pet too, which a lot of people don't appreciate, but the pet can dispel and interrupt, and this is really good on a lot of these fights. It's off GCD. Like you can do a lot as Affliction Log, and you have a very fun and very varied rotation. Let's not say rotation. You have very different damage profiles you can lean into.
Yeah.
And this means you can adapt to your raid, you can adapt to the encounter. It's a very neat thing. The only bad part is that in 10 mans, you're basically always forced to play demo, unless you have another lock taking that spot.
Is is that because you? Why is that actually that you would go
Well,
demo in a 10 minute?
the rate buff is just ridiculous for demo. It's like you run 2 casters, and demo is already the difference between
Oh, really?
affliction and yeah, it's
Oh,
ridiculous. I said in a 25-man raid, it just about doubles your contribution. In a 10-man raid, it's still like plus 40%, plus 50%, and the difference between affliction and demo is not that large that the buff wouldn't, well, basically make the difference.
I see. Okay.
Yeah, so let's rank this.
All right.
It's a bonus that can feel really good. If it procs, it's extremely good, and I would in general put it into feeling good. But it's definitely not on the tier of Shadow Priest 4Ps, which I see, and I wouldn't put it on the value of Retribution Paladin 2Ps, for example. Things that
Gotcha.
significantly affect your rotation and just makes you feel, boom, now something great is happening.
Right. Okay. Cool.
It's just about there, and yeah, I think
Also-
I'm happy with this.
Right on. Okay. Rockin'. Dude, I'm still tempted to just put demo in its own tier.
Yeah, it's just tricky. The general recommendation should always be for anyone who doesn't really want to look hard into whether they want to optimize into this direction, is to just not go for the 0-piece set. And well, you have limited time, at least most players do. And just, looking at the log and seeing what went wrong in the last raid and what you can optimize there is probably a better way to spend your time than figuring out whether you want to distribute loot this direction or this direction.
For sure.
That's just my general way to think about it. I just wanted to emphasize it as an option.
All right. Right on. Louki,
Okay.
anything else? Any other notes you want to add for the Warlocks here?
Mm,
Warlock specs?
yeah, no. I think I'm good. I said all I wanted and could.
All right. Okay, man. I'll see you around, dude.
See ya.
Hello, 1, 2, 3.
Yo, yo, yo. Whoa, how you doing?
All good.
Rockin'. All right, whoa. What can you tell me about the Shaman DPS specs? We got Elemental and Enhancement. Feel free to start with, I guess, whichever one you'd like.
We can start with the ones that are gonna pump this tier. Elemental is seeming pretty well ahead of Enhance. And their tier set is also pretty nice. Gonna bring a lot of quality of life, although purely speaking of tier set, Enhance will be getting even better comparatively to tier 9. Overall, like a tier list is meant to compare like the various classes and their relative power if they are min maxed, but there's a lot of factors, right?
Mm-hmm.
So also the buffs you bring, which Shaman is one of the best.
Yeah.
And that's especially valuable in 10 men and for casual people who might not have the min max setups.
For sure.
But other than that, I think that both of the Shamans are not going to be topping the meters, but they're going to be close enough to be worth for sure. Especially as both of the tier bonuses are getting better this tier, on top of the item levels and gear increases in general.
Right on.
So, specifically on Enhance, one thing that drags the DPS a bit down is that Fire Elemental is always going to be spawned in melee, right? And there's a ton of incidental AoE and damage in Ice Crown. So that's one major cooldown that's probably going to be dead most of the time. We're going to need to find the best times to use it and some way to convince your healers to keep it alive. Also, one thing that hurts Alliance a bit on Ice Crown is that they do not scale as well with armor penetration as the other classes, since
Right.
even with the physical build that we're going to be using this tier, because it's easier to gear and almost all encounters are single target anyway, which is the ideal scenario for the physical Wind Fury build.
Mm-hmm.
It scales better of attack armor penetration, I mean, so that's a little bit of a plus, but nowhere near as good as a warrior or rogue.
Right.
Obviously, they're not gonna scale as well, and that's why they are gonna fall a little bit behind the other classes as everyone gets more gear this tier.
Okay. So that's for the enhance shaman. Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
so elemental also doesn't have like the best scaling ever, right? Compared
Mhm.
to a fire mage, which is the top scaler,
Yeah.
but it's like decent, and especially the fire elemental, you can get some more use of it. Also, you have more spell power in general, so it's a bit easier to make sure that you can have a ton of spell power when you cast it to scale it well. Going over to set bonuses specifically,
Mhm.
while Elemental is like getting a better version of the tier 9 piece bonus, where you extended your Flame Shock by 6 seconds. Now you're going to be extending it every time you cast a Lava Burst, so since the cooldown of Lava Burst is almost the same as the extension, you're going to need to cast way less Flame Shocks, which is a pretty nice quality of life and also a bit more DPS. The two sets, like numerically, probably not that strong, right? You get lower cooldown on the Elemental Mastery, but one like hidden benefit of it is that it can make the cooldown of Elemental Mastery line better with the phases where you actually need the burst. So it's not
Mm.
all about overall DPS, but about having it ready for more like Valkyrie spawns, Blood Beast
Right.
spawns, that kind of steps where you really want the burst.
So what is the cooldown of elemental mastery? Like,
Usually 3 minutes.
gotcha. And then I wonder what the effective cooldown becomes with like the amount of lightning bolts and chain lightnings you'd be drilling off in
Uh,
an
it
encounter.
depends. Obviously, if you can have to move and can't cast as much, but it should bring it to like at least 2 minutes.
Okay.
We're gonna have to see. Like it really depends on the fight, I guess.
Right. Right. That's fair. It's interesting. I guess. I mean, this is already kind of a value point for casters and just trying to plan movement outside of or like move on your movement globals, but this set bonus makes that like even more important for elemental shaman just because of the fact that I mean every extra bolt and chain lightning you can get off acts to reduce that cooldown, so that is
Yeah,
interesting.
exactly. It kind of feeds itself in a sense, although the effect will be small, of course,
Right,
since
right.
the uptime is not super great.
For sure. Yeah.
Which can lead nicely into the enhancement one, because that one has really good uptime. So basically, when you use Shamanistic Rage, usually like it's your defensive cooldown and also a way to get mana back.
Mm-hmm.
Um, you're also going to be doing extra damage now, like all damage, which is really great for Enhance, since it does both physical and magical, right? So it's just a really nice damage boost. And it's up a ton of the time, because the cooldown on Shamanistic Rage by default is only 1 minute anyway.
Right. Yeah, that actually does seem pretty solid.
Yeah, it's a really, really nice bonus. Also with the bonus that you can use it for the add spawns and such, so it's likely to have better outcome than just what it looks in paper if you would multiply your damage by the average
Mm-hmm.
uptime of it. Finally, the fourth set brings like a simplification on the rotation. Um, like I'm not sure if you're familiar with weaving, but basically a maelstrom weapon makes your cast 20% faster per stack, and it stacks to 5.
Yeah.
So like Blizzard's idea is just to like you go to 5 and you cast instant spell and repeat.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
the enhancement community discovered pretty early on Ret that you can actually get a lot of DPS gain by casting below, because the cast does not reset your melee swing timer. So if you time it correctly with some weak arrows and such, you could just gain DPS by like casting your stuff at lower stacks and getting more casts overall. But the set makes you gain attack power sometimes when it reaches maximum. So obviously now
Uh,
we're gonna want it to always go maximum as Blizzard intended.
okay.
So in that yeah, in that regard, it lowers the like your potential DPS compared to min-maxing weaving a little bit, but makes it easier to play. And of course, it's going to be a very nice bonus to have a lot of extra tech power for much of the fight.
Gotcha.
So those sets are really good, especially in Yans. I'm quite excited to play it.
Yeah, enhanced chance set bonuses look quite fun. I mean, well, the 2 set just like a lot of power level, but the 4 set, I mean, there's an element there that changes changes for the gameplay of the class, which I feel for a set bonus to do that is generally kind of a good sign of a good set bonus. Now, it's a little interesting in the enhanced case because I mean, as you highlighted, it like almost reduces kind of the skill ceiling of the class if you're no longer trying to weave in those partial Maelstrom. I mean, I guess you're casting like Lightning Bolt or Chain Lightning as an enhance.
Depends on the enemies.
Gotcha. So I guess I could see that going kind of both ways, but
One problem with it though is the RNG. Like if we read what it does, the percentage that you can get the tech power bonus is really small. So I guess we're gonna see a lot of logs where, like as a meme, the Jans calls, guys, we need to wipe. I didn't get the proc when I was taking with Shamanistic Rage.
go again.
But
Oh
yeah,
my
that's
goodness.
how it goes. I mean, you put it on top of Wind Fury RNG and like Fire Elemental surviving RNG.
Yeah.
So we're gonna see a lot of differences in logs between Enyans, just how lucky you get. But that's
Gotcha.
also part of the fun of the class, right? You roll Wind Fury, so
For sure.
yeah.
Okay,
So
I get that vibe.
wise, sorry if I am going ahead of what you were gonna ask, but I will like put the Enyans at feeling really good, or Gas even, and the LA just feel good.
We can we can do that. That's for you, the decision for you to make.
Just a much more powerful bonus overall. Although, funnily enough, it also comes at the same time as Enyans gets hit by the scaling issues with armor pen and such. So overall, the class itself is going to be weaker. But I mean, we are talking about tier bonuses on this tier list, right? So
Yeah, for sure.
anyway, though, like if you are using already 258, right, you might not want to upgrade instantly to the 251 pieces of tier 10 if it's not like much better than your tier 9 old one, right?
Yeah, that was gonna be the
And
follow-up question.
right, and in that case, I would say that Shaman should decidedly upgrade quickly because the elemental tier set is like the weakest on the two set. It's not super transformative, but it's not like the elemental tier 9 for set that gives you like a little bit more lava burst damage is super transformative either. So might as well just like either do the swap or keep it for a little bit if you have 258 or 258 pieces even.
Right.
But
So
it's not like a big deal.
yeah, the set you're not holding on to tier 9 for the set bonus. You're really just seeing what gear gets me the stats and
It's like mostly whatever you want because the two pieces of the new set isn't like super good either. So
right.
you upgrade if you want, but it's not a big deal if you don't. On Enyans, though, I would recommend to swap ASAP because the old set bonuses are kind of weak. Basically, they only buff small parts of your damage,
Mm-hmm.
like with the lightning shield procs on the enemy when you attack from static surge, and I can't even remember what the 4-piece bonus is, but it also isn't like super amazing. And these tier 10 bonuses are amazing, so decidedly want to upgrade those ASAP, like even if you have 4 to 58 pieces. I think Enhancement is going to have a really nice time this time gearing up because they go back to the physical, and physical pieces have way less competition. Also
Right.
because you're not aiming for the super armor penetration pieces, right?
Yeah.
So like even the hunters don't really like super want what you want and so on, and you have so many different good pieces that Enhance is going to get geared very fast. Elemental still has to compete with every caster, so well,
Little
I
less
guess you
good,
can
but
use some L pieces, but those usually have MP5, so you're gonna suffer a bit. But it is what it is. Nothing new there, unfortunately, for Elemental.
okay. All right. So I mean, despite that, enhanced feeling gas, Ellie Sham's feeling good. Whoa, do you have anything else you wanna add here, or are you feeling good?
No, that's kind of it. Shout out to the Shaman Discord. Like most of the theory crafting and everything that gets done for the class couldn't be done without the people there. So hope everyone keeps up the good work, and we're gonna have good guides going forward, even into Cataclysm and on.
Hell yeah. I appreciate your time, Mo. That's all.
Thanks, man.
Hello?
Hello.
Babyhoof, how you doing?
Yeah, not too bad. Just tired a bit. Been really super busy the past few days, so a bit exhausted.
I appreciate you making some time to link up with me
Always.
here. Yeah, I know
Yeah.
you got a lot going on between your
Always,
10
always happy
characters.
to talk about my least favorite game. You know.
Right on. So, warrior DPS specs. We have Fury and we have Arms. How are we feeling about the tier sets and tier set bonuses for these specs? Feel free to go either both at once or one at a time.
So, right at first glance, the two set not very exciting. You know, at first glance, simple chance on our main dot procking to increase our attack power. Pretty boring. The fourth set is the real gem of this tier. It's a pretty significant rotation altering ability.
Okay.
It basically for arms, every single time you deal damage with your melee weapon, and you swing, not obviously dots or whatever, you have a 9% chance to be able to use sudden execute any time. And for Fury, every time you hit with Whirlwind, main hand Whirlwind hits only, unfortunately, Bloodthirst or Heroic Strike, you have a 20% chance to have your next slam be instant cast.
Uh,
The 4 set adds an additional 20% chance for a second stack of that proc, and for the effect to be reduced to a 1 second GCD. This is very, very notable. Warrior is generally pretty hard capped into our 1.5 second GCD. We don't get haste affecting GCDs for quite a while now. I believe it's Kata, but I'm probably wrong on that
okay.
for us. And this is a very, very important change. It smooths out our
Interesting.
rotation a lot when this procs. Normally, whenever you fall into a standard rotation of Bloodthirst, Whirlwind, Instant, you end up delaying your next Bloodthirst by 0.5 seconds because each of your instants is a 1.5 second
Uh,
global cooldown, and
yeah.
Bloodthirst only has a 4 second cooldown, so you're missing 0.5 Bloodthirst every time. It doesn't sound like a lot, but over the course of a fight, it can add up quite significantly, especially with us using Rend a fair bit in ICC because we'll have so much extra rage. There's quite a
Mhm.
lot of single target, long boss encounters. It helps smooth out our rotation. It's additional crit damage, which is very important with how much extra damage we're going to be doing in ICC with the amount of crit, etc. that we have. Um, Arms is a similar situation. The extra stack is slightly less impactful when compared to Fury, especially since as sudden death loses a bit of its impact in execute phase, but it's still quite a nice increase. It feels like it really speeds up your rotation a little bit as arms, which is something which can feel a bit clunky. Arms runs into a problem where with the slam hard cast mechanic, your rotation can feel a little bit jittery and clunky at points with
I
a
have
0.5 second cast. Yeah.
Yeah, I have heard that as feedback before. Yeah.
It's it really helps smooth it out a bit and reduce the number of slams you cast, and therefore, increase the instance you're using as opposed to just the awful 0.5 second cast ability. Um, yeah, they're quite strong upgrades from our T9 set bonuses as well, which is nice. Our T9 set bonuses are very, very boring. A lot of specs in T9 start getting some decently interesting set bonuses. A lot of dots or hots being able to crit, um, things like that. Whereas
Yeah,
for us, it's just a flat either crit or up increase depending on spec, and then a crit increase on heroic strike and slam.
right.
Effective but boring. Straight away, even the two set enables a little bit more bursty mechanics. You can play around it a touch, especially when you're only going to get one more gloves in a 130 fight. You can wait. Similar with trinkets, is another thing to line up in burst phases, which is
Mm.
adds a little bit more skill expression. But the
Yeah, for
foresight
sure.
is a really huge increase um over anything we've had before in Ulduar or even in Nax. All our set buttons before have been pretty naff in comparison, to be honest.
Okay.
Um, you'll replace your T9 pretty quickly with the T10 stuff. I haven't done a ton of arms simming, mostly because unfortunately arms is not great as a general spec in ICC.
Sure.
Uh, with Shadowmourne, it comes about middle of the pack, which is a very depressing statement to think of. And even then, it's lower middle of the pack.
Yeah.
But for Fury, at least, you'll replace your T9 pretty quickly. As long as you get one piece of 264 gear, you'll replace two piece instantly. Um, So
Okay,
you'll
interesting.
be running 1251, 1264 piece. You use the same off piece in ICC as you do in TOGC, which is the glove slot. So it's usually some pretty modular upgrades you can swap out, and they'll have roughly the same stats anyway. The legs, which is the only awkward item, has a ton of expertise, but so did your legs in TOGC. So
Mm.
it's not a significant gear change to be going from TOGC gear to ICC gear. As long as when you get 4 set, you can instantly replace your, even if you're still running 251 and you haven't managed to get any of the upgrade tokens yet, you'll instantly replace your 4-piece TOGC. It's a
Really? So
very
if you just got 4-piece
yeah. You'll
251,
eat
you would
the
just swap that.
eat the eye level downgrade to have the 4 set
Wow.
bonus.
That speaks volumes.
It's yeah. The 4 pieces. It speaks volumes both to the strength of 4-piece T10 and the weakness of 4-piece T9.
Gotcha.
4-piece T9 is quite nice on single target, but it loses a lot in AoE. Both
Mm.
specs use Heroic Strike and Slam significantly less on cleave fights, and there's a couple of moments, especially in ICC, where cleave can be quite important on some of the more important fights.
Mhm.
Cleaving Valks on Lich King, cleaving Raging Spirits, Putricide, trying to do damage to oozes and Putri at the same time,
Right.
in the non-intermission periods, stuff like that. You have a lot of opportunity for cleave, and cleave is also a big factor in determining the value of our 2-piece. So the 2-piece, every time your deep wounds ticks, has 3% chance to give you 16 attack power. 16 attack power is a lot of attack power.
Mhm.
We are going to be running a ton of strength focused gear and attack power focused gear in ICC. It's a very, very significant increase when it procs. And the uptime on single target, it's not bad. Deep wounds is ticking every 1 second. It does get delayed every time you crit. So you can run into a small issue where if you crit too much too frequently, your deep wounds will tick less, but it's generally not too much for consideration to think about. On
Okay.
AoE, however, every target you're adding, even if you're just whirlwinding them, even if you're not cleaving and it's not a priority target, like ghouls on Phase 1 Lich King, or if you have 2 of the princes stacked on Blood Council, these are extra deep wounds targets for your whirlwind. And if your whirlwind crits on them, you now have 6 extra ticks
Right.
every 8
Effective funnel.
seconds. Yeah, it's pretty. It's not the best funnel in the game,
Mhm.
but there's not a lot of good funnel in this expansion, unfortunately.
Right.
You'll have the occasional dot that procs haste increase, like Affliction Warlocks, or dot that procs other procs like Demo Warlocks. But as a general rule, there isn't a ton which helps for melee specs.
Yeah.
But this is one of them, and it really really helps us feel like adding extra targets is increasing our single target damage further. Extra targets around you is also an increase for your 4 set. So Blood Surge procs off of every Whirlwind hit. So if you're
Oh.
hitting 4 targets with Whirlwind, you now have 4 times the chance to proc Blood Surge as you did when you only had 1 target. It does only proc off the main hand Whirlwind hit, unfortunately it doesn't proc off the offhand,
Right.
which is very consistent with other proc-based abilities that use offhands, unfortunately for Warrior.
Mhm.
But increase the number of Blood Surge procs means more 4 set procs. And that means extra slams which are going out. And every slam can also crit, which means more deep wounds damage. Because outside of being able to proc our 2 set, deep wounds is rapidly approaching one of our highest DPS abilities. Just because the amount of crit we're running, even without gemming for it in ICC. We're rapidly
Interesting.
approaching a soft crit cap in ICC. That's how much crit we're getting. Especially in full base, you get that DBW crit proc. Yeah, you're very, very close to crit cap. And that means a lot of deep wounds damage and a lot of uptime.
Right. That's actually really cool though, seeing how the set bonuses can kind of feed into each other as well.
Yeah, it's definitely a nice little interaction that really rewards you for multiple targets being there, where historically our set bonuses in previous tiers have very much been single target focused.
Mhm.
For arms as well, the 2 set can be really, really huge in mass AoE. Arms has a pretty significant problem with scaling. It's a lot of its abilities are quite weak. They don't scale super well. It doesn't get very much benefit from haste, which is a big problem for it when
Mhm.
there's a lot of haste on some of the gear in ICC and you have to deliberately avoid it.
Right.
And most of all, it suffers in high target cleave over sustained periods of time. Has really great burst cleave with sweeping strikes and blade storm, but
Mhm.
in sustained cleave, it runs into problems because it can't generate any rage while using cleave. Obviously, your only rage source apart from incoming damage is your main hand. And if you're queuing a cleave, you're not getting any rage from that.
Right.
But your damage is definitely helped by the 2-set. Because Thunderclap crits proc deep wounds, you now have a way to easily maintain deep wounds on a lot of targets. And
Oh,
your uptime on deep wounds is gonna skyrocket, and therefore your uptime on the 2-set. So Arms gets a lot of benefit. I don't want to say as much as Fury, because, well, Fury just scales far better than Arms does.
right.
But the Arms AoE has definitely helped a lot, and you can feel it playing with the 2-set and understanding the amount of AP increase you're getting, which definitely helps the struggling spec. But yeah, both of them, while the 2-set ability, is definitely a noticeable increase in cleave, for the act of actually performing cleave damage itself, the 4-set does kind of fall off a little bit. Because it's a single target ability that we care about buffing with the 4-set and that
Mhm.
gets effect from it, you don't see as much of an increase, unfortunately.
For sure.
Your slams a low prio in cleave for Fury, lower prio than many of your other abilities, and lower prio than it would be in single target, and they just constitute less of your overall damage. Because obviously, you're now hitting 3 targets with cleave, your whirlwind's hitting extra targets, and that's making up a large part of your damage. The
Yeah.
GCD increase also doesn't matter a ton. You're prying whirlwind over everything once there's extra targets involved, so you'll ignore the slams. Like you'll be happy to waste slam procs, if that makes sense, from
Right.
overwriting your blood surge with another blood surge in AoE, which is definitely an unfortunate side effect of just how good whirlwind and cleave are as abilities for warrior.
Right.
There isn't really anything you can do about it, and it is the weaker part of the tier set, unfortunately, that our 4-set just has less benefit in cleave. There's a lot of other specs that don't have this restriction because they're just flat damage increases. But I think the intrigue and the fun factor of the 4-set makes up for it a little bit.
For sure.
And the fun factor is a very, very noticeable thing. I talked about how it smooths out both rotations a bit, but having extra buttons to press is just such a noticeable thing.
Yeah.
Fury can run into a problem at points where you just get unlucky with Blood Surge procs and you don't have buttons to press as much as you would want. And while this doesn't do a ton, because it's only now a 4% chance, 20% over 20%, it's definitely a few extra buttons to press every minute, and it can definitely help with the emptiness that you can feel if you're not using Rend in the rotation, which can be a little bit tricky for some people to understand.
For
It's a
sure.
nice, clean button press increase. There's not a lot of tier sets that do that, which is a very fun thing to think about.
Yeah.
There's not a lot of tier sets which just straight up go, here's extra buttons to press in the fight that you have to manage, and they reward you for doing it. But onto a more solid ranking, I would say that the Arms set and the Fury set both probably go in the feeling good tier. They're not absurd increases when compared to some of the set bonuses, but at the same
Okay.
time, a lot of the increase that you get from it just feels good to play with. You know, would just a flat damage increase probably perform better in some situations than the occasionally quite complicated 4-piece that you now need to play around? Yeah, but you're getting extra buttons, and those buttons feel like they have impact, and that's a very important thing in WoW, especially when rotations can feel a little more simple compared to other versions of the game in Wrath. Both of them have a nice little 2-set bonus. You can understand how it interacts with cleave and with single target, and how your time can be increased. You can play around it a little bit, saving cooldowns for that perfect lineup if you have to, trying to get that whirlwind application onto everything, making sure you're, sneaking extra hits maybe at points with it. And then the 4-set just feels fun. Extra buttons is always a fun thing to press,
Mm-hmm.
especially when your rotation consists of only 4 as Fury.
Yep. I fully agree with all the points you made about extra buttons, more value, changing the way the class plays and for a good way. Like all these things are really, really
Yeah.
just good things for, I think, tier sets and what they offer different classes for varying styles of gameplay, which is really cool. And kind of the first, I feel ICC tier is kind of the first tier we're really seeing like significant change from several classes. So really cute, really dope to see that Fury Warrior and Arms as well is getting
Yeah.
these
It's
quality of
not
life improvements.
it's not the most absurd change to the game. Obviously, there are some specs which get pretty absurd spec changes
Yeah.
with the set bonuses, but it's a nice step in the right direction, and you can see what the designers were trying to do. They're making it a little bit more complex, a little bit more tricky to play around, but it feels very rewarding when you get these procs and you can use them effectively. You're not wasting them at all.
Mm-hmm.
It's a good little change, and it's definitely a fun one.
All right, so we're feeling good about Arms
Yep.
and Fury.
We're feeling good.
Feeling good. Hell yeah. Babyhoof, is there
Feeling definitely
anything else you'd want to add regarding the Warrior specs? Any last kind of thoughts, comments?
Nothing really evolved to the tier set, honestly. Not that I can think of, at least.
All
Just
right.
make sure you get it early so you can enjoy the fun before everyone else.
Right on. Okay, Babyhoof, it's been a pleasure. Thanks for your time, man. And
Thanks
I
very
will
much.
see you around, dude. Hello?
Hello, hello. Can you hear me?
Yeah, what's going on? NerdEggHead, if you're good to go by that?
Yeah, that's perfect.
Rockin'. How you doing, man?
Doing well. How about you?
I'm doing all right. I'm doing all right. So, Feral DPS. How are Ferals feeling about this upcoming patch with ICC and Tier 10? Take it away.
Hey, so yeah, our tier 10 for Feral DPS is extremely strong. All the most valuable bonus is the 4-piece bonus, which is probably true for most specs, but the Feral 4-piece is incredibly strong. Just to walk through both the bonuses, right, for DPS, they're also incredibly good for tanking, but I'll talk about just cat right now.
Sure.
The 2-piece bonus is kind of boring, but it does add a sizable amount of DPS. It just lowers the energy cost of Rip, which is the primary damaging finishing move
Right.
in the Feral rotation. It's kind of nice. The problem is it's effectively, you can think of the value of the bonus as being heavily constrained by the fact that Rip is cast infrequently. Right, so Rip is by far the strongest ability, outside of Savage Roar, right, which is just something you keep up all the time. But in terms of just direct damaging abilities, it's the number one ability in the Feral toolkit. It's ridiculously strong. It scales very well.
Yeah.
And most of the rotation and our priorities are centered around keeping it up. But the downside of it is you can effectively think of it as an ability that has an 18-second cooldown. Like, sure, it's a dot and it's a bleed that's ticking over time, but the best way to think of it, and the way I try to help new players think about it, is just think of it as a cooldown ability, because you can never clip it. Clipping bleeds outside of kind of niche situations for mechanics or whatever is a large DPS loss. You never want to do it.
Mm-hmm.
So you can effectively think of it as this is your number one big damage nuke. It doesn't matter if the damage is happening in ticks or all at once. It's a huge nuke, but you can only press it every 18 seconds, right? Because the base duration of Rip is 12 seconds, and then with Glyph of Shred, with 3 extensions, that gets extended to 18 seconds.
Right.
I will say that the changes that Blizzard made to the spec, especially with the Glyph of Omen of Clarity, makes this bonus better than it would have been, specifically because we cast Rip more often now. So previously with standard glyphs, you would also have Glyph of Rip, also a great glyph, not anywhere near as good as the one they ended up giving us to buff us, right? But that glyph gives you an extra 4-second extension, which means that sure, it's good damage, but it makes the bonus even less valuable because you're casting Rip even less often. So you're getting effectively less energy savings out of it.
Yeah.
So you can basically think of this as, okay, you're getting 10 energy every 18 seconds. That's like the simplest way of thinking about the 2-piece bonus, which is still solid. It ends up simming in phase 4 Bisc gear at, the number I have is 190 DPS. So it's still sizable. That's about like, to put it in context, that's around the DPS upgrade you get for Feral for upgrading like any piece, just the stats from like 264 to 277 eye level.
Right.
You get around that much of a DPS increase. So in that sense, it's kind of tuned fairly well, meaning it's like if you're in a position where you can either take a higher eye level piece or take 2-piece, it ends up being about break even. And that's kind of how they tried to tune the bonuses. Now, the 4-piece, on the other hand, is absolutely busted. It's incredibly strong. That bonus allows Rake, which is our other main bleed, but that's our combo point generator bleed, and it's cast more frequently. It allows the ticks of that bleed to crit. And so in that sense, it's kind of analogous to, people talked up, rightfully so, like the Unholy DK 4-piece tier 9 bonus, which conceptually was the same thing. Big periodic damage ability can now crit. And so naturally, with the levels of gear and the levels of crit that we have, it accounts for a ton of DPS. That bonus sims at around 750 DPS just from the bonus, not talking about the stats at all on any of the gear. It's just straight up, just the value of having your Rake crit is worth that much. So that's a real big one. I don't know all of the other specs numbers, so for their bonus value. So I'd be curious, but I wouldn't be surprised if this is up there among the best bonuses that exists for DPS. It's extremely strong. So you mentioned kind of like play style and stuff, and that's another thing worth mentioning here, is that one of the bonus is not just numerically strong, but it's actually the only way you get to keep pressing Rake at all in the DPS rotation. And it's one of the reasons they put it in there, because basically Rake itself just doesn't scale nearly well enough in Wrath relative to Shred, right, which is the combo point generator that it's competing with. The main reason being, it doesn't, before the bonus, it scales very poorly with crit, because only the initial hit could crit and the bleed could not. And then also, more importantly, it doesn't scale with armor pent because it's a bleed, right? And Shred does. So Shred scales with everything, all stats you can get. It's our best scaling ability.
Yeah.
And we're now with the glyph casting it a lot anyway. And so what was going to be the case is if you didn't have this bonus, you would just drop Rake from the DPS rotation entirely, and you would only cast Shred as your builder, just because Shred would be higher damage per energy.
Right.
And this was actually true even in tier 9 at partially so. So at tier 9, even late Ulduar gear levels, we were already dropping Rake selectively, optimally. You didn't have to do this. It was 30-ish DPS min max, but the optimal play was to drop Rake when you got a Mjolnir Runestone proc, specifically for that reason. Because once you were then at armor pen cap or close with the trinket proc rolling, Rake just became less damage for energy than Shred, right? So you would just selectively drop it. You'd still cast it at other times, but it was kind of a min-max we were already doing. And at tier 9 levels, we would have also just been dropping it during trinket procs of any kind, even like a Dark Matter or Death's Verdict proc, just a crit proc alone would be enough to drop it. But our 2-piece tier 9 bonus also kind of saves Rake in the same way, because the devs kind of realized this back then. And so the tier 9 bonus is a little bit different. It doesn't make it crit. It gives you an extension on Rake, and that just extra tick you get from Rake also just makes it worth casting all the time. So in that sense, as a playstyle thing, it's very good that this bonus exists, because it means that we get to keep the diversity of builders. You get to worrying about actually keeping it up. And it actually then makes the damage per energy of Rake so much higher than Shred that actually you start caring a lot more about just your Rake uptime. It's still not like something you value above everything else, like the way we value Rip and Savage Roar uptime. Like you'll still never spend an Omen proc on Rake, for example. It's still always better to spend it on Shred, just because Shred costs more energy. So you'll still have gaps in Rake uptime, but it does mean that keeping it up is more valuable, and it'll, I think, add a little bit more skill expression that way. Because right now, yeah, even with our 2-piece tier 9 bonus, you can more or less, it doesn't really matter. It's kind of like at a break-even point. Yes, it's optimal to prio Rake over Shred when Rake isn't currently up, as long as you don't clip it. But you can also just kind of forget, and it doesn't matter. Just create an extra Shred, like you're not going to be able to tell. Whereas I think in late phase ICC with the bonus, you'll actually be able to start discriminating, like on logs, players who are better about actually pressing their Rake button when they're not clipping any ticks.
Gotcha. Interesting. So there's actually a couple interesting takeaways. I want to go back to the 2-set bonus, and I really liked your analogy of thinking of Rip as like an 18-second cooldown, because there are the importance of not clipping existing finishers or dots for several classes in the game, like right now, is very important. And that's actually, I really like that as a way to describe some of these abilities, as you mentioned, especially for newer players. So that was really cool. And then for the 4-set bonus, and so I did a similar kind of TOGC video for tier set bonuses, although slightly different in the way I constructed the video. But one of the takeaways I had was like any set bonus that had dots now crit or damage over time crits, it does phenomenally well, and almost like unexpectedly so. So the numbers the 750 DPS number you returned is surprising, but also makes sense.
Yep, yeah, it makes sense because it's basically a scaling thing, right? Because the anything that allows your class to just scale better with item level is going to just be dramatically better, right? And so if you just compare even our 2-piece and 4-piece, yeah, just getting a little bit extra energy is nice, and it does scale with gear, right? Because your energy is worth more with more gear, but it's kind of a very weak secondary kind of minor scaling, right? Like you just get to cast a little bit more. You might get an extra cast out in a fight over a sufficiently long length. But anything that just means you are now scaling better with gear, those bonuses are pretty generically across the board going to be the strongest ones. But yeah, I would so again, yeah, not knowing the other specs, it's hard to say, oh, it should be at this level, but I would let's just put it this way, I would be surprised if it's not one of the best bonuses.
Okay.
At least for 4-piece amongst all the specs, but happy to be proven wrong if I see other numbers, but that is just my intuition based on the few numbers I have seen and just how large this bonus is, the 4-piece.
All right, so we're leaning towards gas, is what you're telling me.
I think so, yeah.
Okay, right on. Anything I guess else you want to add to that point, or?
Not really. I guess one soft thing in terms of Feral that is worth mentioning, which is not going to show up in DPS comparisons, is the fact that the bonuses are incredibly good for Bear as well. And this is actually a new thing. Like the Feral bonuses have oftentimes at least one of the 2 bonuses has been pretty good for Feral DPS all through Wrath. Like 2-piece tier 7 was extremely good, 2-piece tier 8 was pretty good, 2-piece tier 9 was pretty good. But the Bear bonuses have often been useless to the point where, like, if you're an actual full-time Feral tank player, you don't care about them at all. You just stack eye level and stam. And this is the first time for all the tanks, the 4-piece bonuses are completely juiced this phase. And if you're not like one of the guilds pushing for like a week 1 Lich King with these giga stacked comps, like they're borderline mandatory, right? To be able to survive heroic Lich King is having that extra 4-piece defensive cooldown, right?
Right.
But I wanted to bring out, that's like a tank specific thing, but I wanted to bring up that for the kind of hybrid niche that Feral DPS players will often perform, the 4-piece bonus is extremely good for that, of having an extra defensive cooldown that you can just have just by going Bear and pressing Enrage, even if you're nominally a pure DPS player. And that will come into play, especially on farm with optimized strats for a lot of bosses. So I can give some examples of that, right? Like, so already on the PTR, a fairly common thing people will do is have their pure cat Feral on Lady Deathwhisper, just cat phase 1. only, and then either normally 2 tank the ads or even have a paladin solo tank the ads. And then your pure cat geared feral can actually help chase threat on the boss in phase 2, because that's oftentimes a pain point, right?
Yeah.
There's other ways around that mechanic too, but this is one strategy people will do, where your cat just goes and pumps onto the boss, and in pure DPS gear. And so just having an extra cooldown, you get to just pop, which is not only a threat and damage cooldown, but also just gives you DR, lets you just pretty comfortably, especially with 277 loot, just survive that boss. Like even you can even live, generally you can live right now if everyone's good about Frostbolt interrupts, but even if they're not, you can live one comfortably if you have 277 gear and you have Enrage popped. Another common one is Festergut, right? Where ferals will oftentimes, in just pure DPS gear, go bear initially on pull to get some stacks of the free damage buff. And the boss, before the boss, builds up his stacks and starts really clapping the tank, he still hits hard, especially if you're in DPS gear. But again, if you can just roll cooldowns and now you have a 4-piece that's giving you another cooldown to roll, that's more stacks you get to just pick up for free before you hand it off to like your paladin who'll tank the rest of it, right? And then you just get a blast the rest of the fight with that damage buff. Eventually on farm, even Sour Fang might work that way, similar to the kind of phase punch soak strats people were doing for Algalon. You could do the same thing. Early on Prog, right, you'll probably want 2 proper tanks, but like eventually you can do the same thing. You have a feral just taunt the Rune of Blood, soak it, have a cooldown popped, so that because that boss still hits really hard, right? So you still need a cooldown pop, but now you have an extra one. And then eventually, because taunt will go on DR, you'll actually need the tank for a full 20 seconds if you do a strat like that. And so then again, having Enrage plus Barkskin plus Survival Instincts all in your DPS spec and DPS gear just lets you live that, and then you can solo tank the fight effectively. So I wanted to call that out as kind of a benefit people might not think about initially when just looking at DPS values, but it does overall benefit feral a ton, that the bonuses are so good for both forms.
Oh, for sure. That's actually, I'm really glad you brought that up, because ferals, or a lot of feral druids will be in a guild where maybe they're the only feral druid. This might change in ICC if ferals start doing crazy damage, but if you happen to be in that scenario where you kind of fill this hybrid tank DPS role, that's, as you pointed out, a very nice quality of life. And that I would argue that definitely kind of just solidifies it as a gas tier set.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it just it changes. I think it even on farm can even change the strats you do on bosses, right? So I would call that a pretty powerful bonus in that respect. I think kudos to the devs back then finally figured out how to give nice bonuses that actually play into feral being hybrid, right?
For sure. That is pretty dope. The one thing that maybe works a little bit against the feral, or the set bonuses that don't really complement the class, is it looks like it doesn't really do much for AoE and cleave, and I think you kind of pointed this out earlier. Maybe, I don't know if you can speak more to that.
Yeah, it doesn't. And that's been a common theme for the most part. None of the feral bonuses have benefited AoE. The only one that did was our 4-piece tier 8, but in an indirect way. That bonus was really fun, and people would even have different trash sets for Ulduar speedruns and stuff. Specifically, even though 4-piece tier 8 wasn't BIS for our spec at the time, but people would run it just for trash sets, because that bonus would extend your Savage Roar, which is something, right, you need to keep up 100% of the time. And so if you get 8 seconds longer on that, which is pretty significant, that's just more swipes you get to pump out on a trash pack, or you can carry one Savage Roar all the way on to the next pack. Which is actually functionally a lot of damage. So we unfortunately don't get anything like that for this bonus, and they were very careful that even the swipe bonus that is in the 2-piece is only for bear. It's not for cat, which is
that would be broken.
There's nothing to boost AoE. But that being said, for actual hard AoE, feral DPS doesn't need help right now. The Omen Glyph is just too broken for that. If you've seen good ferals on large trash packs in Ulduar, or even the few big giga pulls people do in ICC, it's broken right now, the amount of damage feral can do. and it's only going to scale swipe scales better with armor pen than any other spell we have. So it's I don't think Feral needs help there. So it's basically just a single target tier bonus. For Bear, it actually is nice because it's not going to change the game. Like Bear AoE threat has always been garbage in Wrath. It's one of the biggest weaknesses of the spec. It's generally just not used. It's not a big deal because normally you don't use your Bear to tank trash. Like if you are using a Feral off tank, like you play to its strengths. But it is a kind of nice quality of life there that 20% more on swipe will be pretty noticeable for a lot of people, but it's not gonna turn you into a warrior or paladin, right? It's not gonna make up that gap, but it'll be nice.
All right, rocking. So Feral Druids are feeling real good. They're gassed up about their tier set bonuses. NerdEggHead, is there anything else that you would want to speak on behalf of Feral Druids before we call there?
Not really. The only thing is if you are a Feral watching this, this is probably true for most specs, but especially true based on everything we've just said. Your number one absolute highest priority in the phase with your emblems is getting 4-piece. Like that is more important than any other thing you might spend on emblems. It doesn't matter what your current gear situation is. You want to save for that because of everything we just said. You want to complete that 4-piece before you worry about other emblem upgrades.
So is it? Let's assume a Feral Druid's going into ICC with like 4. Do you run 4-piece 258 Regalia?
Currently, yes. That's the full BIS, but practically speaking, there's a very small number of Ferals who actually use it simply because it's a very minor upgrade over like a 2-piece alternative, even though it's technically BIS, and very few guilds actually prio their Ferals Regalia for that reason. So unless you're in a guild that did a bajillion splits in TOGC, you're unlikely to be running that to begin with. But yeah, technically you'd run 4-piece right now.
And so I mean, if you're 4-piece or not, let's say you're kitted out with 258 gear and all of your major kind of quote unquote tier slots, whether or not those actually have tier. Do you just want to rush? Let's say you go straight for 251 tier. Is that eye level decrease? Getting the set bonus still worthwhile?
If you get the bonus. So individually, the pieces are not worth it if you have very good very good phase 3 gear of any kind. But generally, what I recommend is that people hold their emblems until they have enough for 2 pieces. So don't buy anything off the rip unless you get, say, lucky with VOA or something. But assuming you don't, just hold your emblems until you can buy 2 pieces. Then, based on whatever loot you've happened to, everyone's going to scoop up a bunch of random loot in the first 2 weeks from 10 man and all kinds of things, right? Based on what you happen to get, you sim and figure out where to slot which 2 pieces to actually buy once you can get 2. And then your first natural upgrade would be to do a 2-piece with tier 9 and tier 10.
Okay.
And that pretty much, no matter where you're at gear-wise right now, will usually be correct for almost any Feral to go do that. And then, again, you hold off and save until you can finish off the remaining 4 or get them from VOA or whatever. And then you swap in all 4. And even if, by that point, most people will probably have a token or 2 to upgrade some of the pieces to 264. But even if you have none, just because the bonus is so good, it's worth running all 4 251 over the best stuff you could have had this phase.
Wow. Okay. Strong set bonuses for sure, and awesome and good gearing advice, which is definitely applicable for many classes. All right, NerdEggHead, if there's nothing else, then I think we're good.
Cool. Sounds good. Nice chatting.
All right. Yeah. Thanks for your time, man.
Yo, can you hear me?
Yeah. What's going on, Sarthe?
What's up, Shindig? How you doing, brother?
I'm doing well, man. I'm doing well. Dude, thanks for joining me today.
Absolutely. Okay, well, let's start with Unholy Decays, because these guys are going to be essentially like the Giga Chads moving into the phase. They're probably going to carry every guild's progression, and I say that all the time, but it's very true. They just have the best set bonuses in TOGC ever.
Right.
Like, that is just insanely strong. They're right now in TOGC, basically what you get is you get 180 strength if the proc actually goes off for 15 seconds. And that does apply to your gargoyle. It makes it really strong for snapshotting, and it's also really strong for cleave. And then your blood plagues, which is like a ton of your damage, can crit, which is also amazing for single target. But then again, cleave just becomes off the wall for unholy DKs.
For sure.
That really falls off a few weeks in for unholy specifically, because these set bonuses from the tier 10 do not really help unholy DKs. The 2 set bonus gives your Scourge Strike 10% damage, and right now Scourge Strike, because we're dual wielding, is about like 2 to 5% of your damage. It's not something insane, so that 2 set bonus is not buffing your damage whatsoever. And then your 4 set bonus gives you pretty much a permanent 3% damage increase, which is really good, but relative, like it's a small damage increase compared to some of the other classes set bonuses. If you like were to compare them to something like Mage, which has the craziest set. So it feels the set bonuses within ICC for unholy specifically are probably potentially the worst for any class moving into the phase. It's potentially the worst because, one, your 2 set does not really buff you very much. You're actually losing out on a ton of damage from not being able to snapshot your Gary as compared to the other 2 set. And the other 4 set is a very, very strong 4 set for you. So this is probably the worst 4 set or the worst tier set. And then on top of that, for unholy DK, all 4 or 3 of the 4 pieces you will be using, which is everything but the legs, 3 of them give you crit and armor pen, which is amazing if you are doing a lot of physical damage, but you're not as an unholy DK. So this is great for frost and blood, but it is very weak for unholy. So at the start of the phase and all the way until you get Shadowmourne and swap to 2-handed spec, where then you're Scourge Striking a lot more, and that 10% damage to your Scourge Strike feels good. The set bonus is potentially the worst. I think it's the worst for any of the DPS classes in the expansion.
Really? Okay, so are you thinking then, is that bad enough to land unholy in the swamp, or are we not quite down there? What do you think?
If it's specifically talking about tier and tier set bonuses as well as how tier is for you, yes.
Okay.
3 of 4 pieces literally are just like, none of them are giving you your best stats, which would be haste, and the gloves give you crit and hit, which is nice, but because you need the hit in that position, but none of them are giving you haste. So yes, it is swamp, unfortunately, for unholy. Which feels bad because moving into the phase, you are the best class and warlocks, but you will be you'll be last on prio for your tier set if you are staying unholy. But luckily for unholy DKs, you can literally almost have the exact same DPS using complete offset items. Like you can wear 0 pieces of tier. The thing is, you don't replace your 4 set for unholies from TOGC until you have a replacement for every single slot. So all 4 pieces.
Wow. Yeah. Okay. All right. So unholy DKs, not feeling great about their tier set bonuses, but I mean, they're very powerful now. So it's, they've had their time in the sun. Icarus flying a little bit too close, but I mean, maybe there's a Shadowmourne angle and then 2 set kind of comes online a little bit, but until then, so that's unholy DKs in the swamp. How are you feeling about, let's do Frost next, I guess.
Frost. Okay, so Frost actually loves their set bonuses. In specifics, talking about single target for the most part. So Frost right now aren't getting much from these set bonuses from TOGC. Like you are getting damage to your diseases, but that's not where most of your damage comes from. Most of your damage as a Frost DK comes from Obliterate, Melee, and Frost Strike. And then if there's Cleave, your damage comes from Howling Blast. But Obliterate right now is like about 30% of your damage if you're looking at a good fight. And so just getting the 2 set alone for Frost will up that to about 35-ish. That's not like exact, but it's giving you like 200 to 400 DPS just from getting your 2 set on any of the pieces almost. So the Frost DKs love their set bonuses. It wouldn't be as good as as some of the other classes that might get like the most ridiculous set bonuses, but you're getting 10% damage to your obliterate, and you're getting a ton of strength from the set. The gear is just really good, and it all gives crit and armor pen, which like Frosty Ks absolutely love. So you're going to start gemming armor penetration this phase as well for Frosty K, which is also going to be a big change for you. Right now you're mostly gemming strength, and you'll start actually as you get enough armor pen, because it's kind of exponential the way armor pen works. It just gets, once you have enough, you can start focusing on that, and it gets way stronger for each value. So Frosty K is very strong 2-set. The 2-set in particular, very, very good for you. You're literally going to swap off right as you get 2 pieces. Like if you get 2 heroic pieces, you'll swap your pieces for that, and it'll be a big DPS increase for you. And then the 4-set will be a huge DPS increase for you, more specifically because you are getting you're getting that armor pen and stats. The 3% damage bonus that you're getting pretty much all of the time is really nice. But that actually scales even better as you get stronger weapons, because it's 3% to your weapon damage, your spells, and all of your abilities. So as you get stronger weapons, that even gets better. That 3% just like scales, right? So as you're getting more and more gear, that gets better, but it still isn't necessarily the best if you're looking at all of the tier sets next to each other. But Frost gets a huge DPS increase. This is like, they were feeling okay in this phase, very much okay. And in ICC, Frosty Ks are looking really, really strong. A good Frosty K is going to be able to absolutely pump and top the meters again. But it is another thing where some physical classes may be stronger, Feral Druid mainly. But yeah, Frosty K loves their 4-set. It loves their 2-set and likes their 4-set. So I would say it's in the feeling good category. I would say it's feeling really good. Frosty K set bonus, yes, great. Okay. And the stats are just really good.
Right on. And then that leaves Blood DPS, which comes online as a spec in this phase, or maybe you can kind of speak more to that.
Yeah, so technically it's been doable forever, but it actually comes online to be a comparable spec this phase. You'll actually win a lot of fights. Like there was specifically like Twins fight where like you're cleaving all the time, and it has an insane burst window at the opener of fights. But it really, really comes online this phase in the sense that, one, you're finally getting a ton of armor penetration, so you can go for armor pen cap, you can gem armor pen like you could with Frost. And also you can get things like, if you can get prioritize on something like a Deathbringer's Will, it is crazy. You can get Shadowmourne, which is obviously just nuts. So Blood DK DPS is no longer quote unquote meme, but it won't necessarily be as strong as some of the other specs, but it's still, you like absolutely could do it. So their set bonuses, again, just like Frost, because they like a lot of the same stats, not exactly the same, but like they do very much like a lot of the same stats. Armor penetration is phenomenal because a ton of your damage is physical. Almost all of your, like not all of it, but like the damage you get from diseases is very low comparative to anything like Unholy. And so you are doing a lot of basically strikes. You're doing like Death Strike, Heart Strike. Heart Strike cleaves also, which is good for any fight that has cleave, which is where you'll see these guys looking really good. But you're getting crit and armor pen from all of your items, which is really good. This is the one out of the 4 or the DPS specs where you actually use a different 4-set. You use the legs instead of the gloves. Everyone else uses the gloves instead of the legs, but now your gloves will be a little bit contested because they're like a leather bisque piece, which is pretty nice. But this is 2-set, very strong. Heart Strike gets 10% extra or 7% extra damage. It's not as good as Blood getting 10% for Obliterate, but you're heart striking more often. You can heart strike more often than you can obliterate. So, and it cleaves. So it makes sense that it's not necessarily as strong. And your 4-set, it gives you 3% damage again, which is, I don't know actually if it ever falls off because of how runes work with Blood, where you'll get all of your death runes and you could be heart striking. So I don't know if it's 15 seconds. You'll have it up at all times. So 3% damage at all times.
Sure.
So I would say it is in the decent, like it is huge. It's going to be a huge upgrade for them. Blood is going to be way stronger than it is right now. and if there's cleave, like you're doing 3% damage plus 7%, you're doing 10% damage more to everything. And I don't know if it's additive or exponential, or multiplicative. I have to check on that.
Okay.
But it is in the decent. Like, it's good. It's really good. You're getting a ton of strength. You're getting a ton of armor penetration. It really relatively might be better than it is for Frost, but the caveat for Blood that is the big thing is you realistically need a Shadowmourne to be competitive, and Shadowmournes are relatively easy to get. Everyone should be able to get them.
Yep, good point.
But you probably are last on prio. But as Death Knights, the one thing that feels bad for DKs this phase is you're sharing your tier bonuses, right? You're sharing your tier gear with Ferals, Rogues, Druids. Well, I guess Ferals, yeah. Rogues, Druids, and Mages, which all of them are just really strong. Especially Mages are probably going to get prioritized, at least 2 set. And then Ferals will get prioritized. So you're a little bit behind everybody on getting the heroic pieces. But either way, everybody has to get your emblems to be able to get pieces no matter what.
Right.
So it is in the decent category for sure. There's one thing I do want to mention, though, that most people probably won't think about until they realize it, but the tanking set bonus, the 2 set tanking bonus, where it doesn't really give you good stats, but the 2 set actually gives you 20% damage to Death and Decay, which in some AoE pulls, if you ever have like a big AoE pull, you would absolutely throw that on, and you would throw on something that would give you strength. So you might, depending on what trinkets you have right now, you would end up throwing on like a Greatness over a Comet's Trail, and you would just, that would be a crazy amount of damage getting the 2 set. So you can just grab that from your sigils for now, since the stats aren't insane. They all have, except for the gloves, all of them are purely defensive stats. The gloves do have hit, which is similar to the gloves that we have now, but yeah, it's a 20% damage to Death and Decay. It'd only be for trash. There's no boss situations I can think of that you would ever use that. But it's worth noting.
Right on. I mean, you think maybe Lady Death Whisper, or does you not think it's
no? It's not. It's not. Yeah, there's like the checks, DPS checks currently, where you're focusing on so much on single target. You do a lot of cleave, but not all the time. The boss is usually moving a lot in phase 2, so Death and Decay doesn't get 100% uptime on the boss or on the ads.
Right.
And as we get more gear, we're just gonna like go for nuking the boss, where Frost will be able to hit like some crazy Howling Blasts, and Unholy can spread diseases, but you won't end up using something like the 2 set bonus on that fight. So it won't, I don't see any place where it'll see an actual use on bosses, but it will definitely be useful on some trash packs in speedruns, or I think everyone will end up doing some crazy trash pulls, even in like GDKPs, to have fun. Yeah.
Right on. One thing I was going to add too, and this is just the set bonuses specifically for Blood and Frost, like DPS. The fact that both set bonuses are direct damage modifiers, and it's this late into the phase where, statted classes start scaling quite well. Frost DKs generally being one of those. I mean, Blood DKs you could argue too, with Armor Pen kind of coming online with Armor Pen and Critical Strike. Those damage modifiers are generally like good set bonuses to see. So definitely hearing you explain these things, confirms this suspicion I had.
Yeah, especially when you're hitting a lot harder on every ability, and then you have like a 10% more damage on something that's hitting a lot harder. That's huge, right? Like that just always scales. So as you get like better weapons, especially for Frost and Blood, those things just keep scaling, and you have more Armor Pen, and they're really nice. But not God tier yet because of some of the other classes, obviously. I was saying. Yeah, absolutely.
All right, Sarthe, this is great. Is there anything else you'd want to speak to the DK DPS specs before we call it there?
I guess I should mention really quick that anyone wondering, that's a Frost DK. You will go Frost Unholy. So you're now finally going Frost Unholy, which allows you to have kind of a more chill rotation. Your like diseases are up for longer, so you get more obliterates out consistently, which also looks better as you're getting 10% more damage on obliterate. So that's always really nice. And then as an Unholy DK, yeah, as an Unholy Decay, you're pretty focused on probably getting offset items, like I mentioned, instead of the tier right away. So I think that's everything for now. So yeah.
All right, right on. Sarthe, thank you, man.
Shindig, thank you for having me, man.
I'll talk to you later, dude.
All right, take care, bro.
Yeah. Okay, moving on then to Rogue. So unfortunately, I wasn't able to bring anyone on to speak to the tier set bonuses for the Rogue specializations. However, the Rogue Discord actually has a lot of very good discourse regarding this information. And there's one resource that actually discusses the tier set bonuses in detail. And this is a document that's worked on and was made by Wherefore. He's a very well-known, credible source within the Rogue simming theory crafting community. I'll include a link below. I believe he simmed values for this sheet from Simon Ives' Rogue spreadsheet, which I'll also include a link to if you want to check it out. But in that document, there's a little excerpt on the Rogue tier set bonuses. And I'm just going to read off that here, and I'll kind of attach my thoughts after I go through it. So, the 2-piece set bonus is quite strong. It translates to usually 1 energy per second, and turning energy into damage at about 300 to 400 damage per energy is a general figure in ICC setups. So it's at least 300 DPS to simply activate the 2-piece set bonus. Your tier items generally have some of the best stats and highest item levels you can obtain, so every rogue is going to be interested in activating their 2-piece set bonus quickly. The 4-piece bonus gives you a 1 in 8 chance to get 3 combo points after casting a finisher. This means you get a little more than a third of a combo point per finisher cast. So after 13 finishers, you should expect 5 combo points. That's not a free 5-point finisher. You still have to pay the 25 to 35 energy to cast it. So getting a discounted finisher every 13 finishers isn't that amazing. It simulates the same, being not a particularly enticing set bonus. So for the spec specifically, combat rogues tend to prefer 2-piece setups with powerful off-pieces, but the 4-piece setups are barely behind. Mutilate rogues tend to prefer 4-piece setups, but that's mostly because the other item combinations just have a ton of armor penetration on them. So that's a little excerpt from the document. If you're interested in learning more, you can go check it out. Now, somebody that mains rogue, my takeaways from this are kind of the following. So the 2-set bonus being strong definitely makes sense. It also scales quite nicely with gear because energy is a resource that we spend to use our abilities. However, it doesn't scale as well as some other classes, in particular classes with like percent damage modifiers that apply to 100% of their damage profile. Energy, while being a resource we spend to use abilities, generally accounts for less than 50% of our damage profile. More often, in this, I'm just kind of pulling this number out of thin air, but generally more than 50% of our damage will be in the form of melee hits and poison damage. And having more energy doesn't really impact that part of our damage profile. But being able to press tricks of the trade and have it be a rewarding thing as opposed to being something that punishes you for pressing it and doesn't show up on your logs anywhere is definitely going to be a huge quality of life. So rogues are, as a rogue, I'm definitely excited about the 2-piece set bonus. The 4-piece set bonus, giving you a small chance to get 3 combo points after using a finisher. It sounds pretty cool in principle, but kind of falling from the point I discussed about the 2-set bonus, where the vast majority of your damage is in the form of auto attacks and poison damage. Getting another finisher doesn't really contribute much to your overall damage profile. As an assassination rogue, getting this 4-piece to proc might result in an extra envenom or 2 or 3 over the course of an encounter, depending on how often it procs. Which envenom is a very powerful finisher, but again, it makes up such a small percent of our overall damage profile. I was looking at a log of my most recent Northrend Beasts kill on my rogue, and I think envenom was about 15% of my damage dealt to the boss, right? So getting extra 1 or 2 or 3 of those, you're not going to see a large effect. And then most likely even less so for combat rogues, who kind of their playstyle is predicated on planning around your combo point usage. So if you suddenly get 3 combo points out of the blue, you've already generally planned ahead for the next 10 to 15 seconds. You're not really going to be able to effectively utilize those 3 combo points. So it can kind of lead to some awkward setups. And hence that's why, at least to me, it seems like the 4-piece set bonus just doesn't really do much for you. So with that said, how is combat and assassination feeling about their tier set bonuses? The 2 set is very nice. The 4 set not being great definitely kind of weighs it down. I think an argument could be made to slot both specializations into feeling good. The reason I say this is because tier 9 for rogues, so their current tier set bonuses, are very bad. The set bonuses do almost nothing for the specs. They're some of the worst set bonuses in the game right now. So going from that to having a set bonus that does meaningful damage and rewards you for using an ability that you're otherwise punished for using. Again, formerly tricks would buff the damage of somebody else, but reduce your personal damage, and that damage wouldn't show up anywhere on logs. So you're just you're essentially handicapping your damage for the sake of the raid, right? Up until this point in the game. So that's an exciting change. I think rogues are definitely feeling good as a result. I think an argument could be made to move the specs apart, so we could put assassination set bonus slightly ahead of combat, for the reason brought up in the sheet that I was discussing earlier, where assassination rogues generally run 4-piece in most setups, as opposed to combat that prefer to run 2-piece setups. However, a good part of this reasoning was because the off pieces generally have armor penetration on, which assassination rogues don't need. So I'm not sure if I want to leave these in separate tiers or put them in the same one. I mean, ultimately, it doesn't matter. It's just about facilitating conversation. I think I will put assassination and combat in decent, because the 4-piece set bonus doesn't do much for either specs, which can't be said about all the other specializations here. Pretty much every spec here wants to run 4-piece. Combat, the fact that combat doesn't run 4-piece, I think I've talked myself into this. We're doing this. Okay, cool. And then we're left with subtlety. So sub probably gains. There isn't really, I don't have any information on sub. So I'm going to use the same logic that Oneshot did when he was referring to the hunter specs. In that logic, to summarize, subtlety does a lot less damage than both assassination and combat, which likely implies that the set bonuses contribute less to subtlety's damage profile than they would to combat and assassination. Right? 2-piece set bonus is a good example. It essentially grants you energy based on how much damage you deal with that energy. Subtlety is doing slightly less damage on average than both combat and assassination. They're going to get slightly less value from that energy. There might be a point about 4-piece being a little bit more valuable for subtlety, because I think they love pressing finishers since they use eviscerate. However, we're just going to put them in the ant tier and call it good. I think another thing too that makes me lean in the direction of placing assassination ahead of combat is the fact that the current tier 9 gear is actually worse for assassination than it is for combat. So assassination, because assassination don't use rupture in current phase 3 bis, there are setups where you can run rupture, but in general you don't. As a result, one of the set bonuses basically increases the damage that rupture deals, so it's better for combat than it is for assassination. So assassination's probably going to see a larger relative boost from the set bonuses than combat will, and hence I think assassination's feeling a little bit better about it than combat. So I think I'm cool with that. Yo.
Yeah. What's up?
Hey, I appreciate you taking some time here to meet with me and talk a little bit about the Ret tier set and tier set bonuses, man.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, talk about it pretty much every day in the Discord anyway. So
right on, dude. I hear Rets are also like pretty damn good though, so I'm kind of excited to hear what you have to say on that front. But
I mean, yeah. I mean, should I just start going or?
Sure, word. Tell me about the Ret set bonuses.
So the retribution set bonus is kind of insane. I mean, we're going from around the bottom single target DPS throughout the phase to close to the highest single target DPS, like top 5 area. Part of that is SM, part of that is Tiny Abomination in a jar, but a big part of that is also the set bonuses. So just equipping the 4-piece, like if you have phase 3 gear and you just equip the 4-piece, Like the lowest item level 251, basic 4-piece. So you're actually losing item level going from phase 3 Abyss set, which is 258, to the 251 stuff in ICC. You're still gaining 350 DPS from equipping that 4 set, which is it's a decent amount, especially when you consider that our 2-piece from tier 9 is like also a pretty legendary set bonus because it's your Righteous Vengeance can crit. It's like our Deep Wounds kind of thing.
Right.
So, that kind of like, 2-piece, which is like 2-piece tier 9 and 2-piece tier 10 is very close to that damage, like the 4-piece damage.
Okay.
So the 2-piece from tier 9 is pretty close to the 4 set from tier 10. So,
Right.
but if you go from phase 3 Abyss to the highest item level 4 set, it's like well over 1,000 DPS. So even though you're losing that 2 set bonus, it's still pretty insane. And it's a bigger deal on Cleave too, because our 4 set is just to make it clear, our 2 set is Divine Storm reset, 40% chance on every auto attack. So it's just white hits, but it happens quite a lot. And then our 4 set is 10% seal damage and judgment damage. So that's a really, really big deal on Cleave, especially because it boosts seal of command damage, which is like a third of our damage on Cleave. Anytime we're cleaving, it's like a third of our damage, which is insane.
Yeah.
So it's big on Cleave. The Divine Storm reset goes hand in hand with that. You do more Divine Storms, you get more seals. And also with Tiny Abomination in a Jar, because every time you get a Tiny Abomination in a Jar proc, you get a seal swing as well. So the extra seal damage, they have great synergy. The Jar, Trinket, SM, and both set bonuses have pretty amazing synergy. Like, for example, if you get Tiny Abomination in a Jar on week 1, it's like 650 DPS over your greatness. But if you equip 4-piece before you put it on, the lowest item level 4-piece, 251 item level, then it's all the way up to 900 DPS already. Like the set bonuses scale everything else like crazy.
Interesting.
Yeah, so it's like all these little interlocking pieces for Ret come together and like scale with each other.
Right.
Even just like stats like haste, which we used to not really care about, become a lot better now because now we're getting more Divine Storm resets from it. It's just a little bit limited in how much DPS we get from that 2-set bonus where you reset your Divine Storm, because we actually can't use all of them. Like we just don't have enough globals. Every now and then we can use them, but every now and then we have like other stuff we got to cast, ahead of time. It's not like our highest priority spell. So
I imagine like so I don't play Ret, right? As a non-Ret player in a Cleave AoE situation, Divine Storm is not your kind of highest priority press, or like what does that rotation look like?
Well, it will be with the set bonus. So for Cleave anyway, not for single target. So for Cleave, it's like your most important. We have like our rotation doesn't repeat. It's like instead we use like a priority list, right? We have our spells ranked in, best spell to worst spell basically, and you just kind of follow that, and that's just like the best DPS you can do. It's just following that. So on single target, Divine Storm is like number 3, and it actually stays number 3 even with the set bonus. But that's mainly because if you put it higher, then you end up just losing too many Crusader Strike casts, because Crusader Strike is like every 4 seconds. So you do it like once every 3 spells.
Right.
So if you put Divine Storm higher than that, every now and then you'll get a lot of resets, but it's going to like really screw up your Crusader Strike cast per minute, at least.
Gotcha.
That's what we think right now anyway, based on like, simulating everything.
For sure.
So on Cleave, every time you get that reset, you're just going to press Divine Storm again because it's like your top ability.
Gotcha.
On single target, it's going to be, you might not use it right away, or you might, depending on where you are in the rotation. So it's a bigger deal on Cleave, no doubt. Our Cleave is already good, but gets even better. It's not up to the par with like where Fury is going to be, but I would say it's just like a tier below that. So it's going to be a really strong A tier Cleave or whatever. And because both of the set bonuses are so strong and they're so strong together, I honestly would think that if you're considering both of them, it's probably like, S tier, S plus tier. I'm not super familiar with other classes set bonuses though. I know that like Fire Mage is insane, obviously, because I've read theirs.
Yeah.
It looks insane. But just the fact that just equipping your 4-piece which is like lower item level, whatever, brings you up that much is pretty insane. I think in what we did before is like we put together a document every phase where we like talk about the raids and the best gear and everything.
Mhm.
And this phase we did like a sim where we we take a gear set and then we equip or unequip tier, and then you change the stats back to what they were before. So you're just like simming the set bonus,
Mhm.
right? And for that, it's like the 2 set looks like about 500 DPS, and the 4 set looks to be about like 450 DPS. So a little bit worse, but on the same like order of magnitude. So together, in full bisque gear, I believe it's like close to 1,000 DPS for both set bonuses. So it's really, really insane. And I think that Ret will probably end up being one of the classes that a lot of guilds prio, marks to upgrade their tier for. Not only because we just don't compete on a lot of other items, but because it's a big deal for us. You're already gonna have the set bonus, but just upgrading those items is a big deal. So
For sure. Okay, that's looks really good for Ret Paladin. Those numbers definitely seem high. I mean, I know not some of the class reps I've talked to have given values for their DPS set bonuses. The Ret set bonus basically puts it roughly in line with what like the Feral set bonuses get out of it. But really like beyond power level as well. Also, I think the fact that you get to play around Divine Storm refreshes and procs definitely seems like kind of a fun quality of life thing.
oh yeah. I mean, our rotation is kind of boring if I'm being real, and it adds a lot of spice to it.
Okay, right on. Like honestly, with that out of the way, and also like if you think of really significant damage checks or damage windows within ICC, I mean, I think of Heroic Lich King Phase 2 Valkyr Cleave being like a prime example of where this tier set and just Rets in general can really do some work. So, I mean,
Oh yeah.
based on what you said, I feel like if you want to throw it in gas, dude, we can totally do that.
Yeah, honestly, I think it's up there. I think most people would agree that it's, among the best set bonuses. I don't think that's going to be a very contentious thing to say that it's really good. Everyone knows it's good. We kind of expected, because everybody's been saying for this whole time that, Red's gotten a bunch of changes throughout Wrath originally, and people always say that we're tuned around the set bonus, and that's why we're bad. Like, I don't know how much truth I would say to being tuned around the set bonus, but we were definitely like, this was definitely the patch that we're playing on, is that we had the set bonus originally. And before that, before ICC originally, our class looked way different. Like Crusader Strike was 6 seconds and did more damage. And, we had Seal of Blood going into Ulduar, and it was just like a completely different class. So like we've always been playing in Wrath Classic, the ICC version of Ret, but we never had the ICC set bonuses that went with it. So that's one of the common talking points is like, yeah, we're playing on the patch where Red is supposed to have their set bonuses and they don't, and they're like really bad. And that's I think one of the reasons too why in phase 3 when we got that 2-piece, which is like our deep wounds critting, which I said is really good.
Mm-hmm.
That's why we started to kind of move up the DPS ranks. We're not like totally at the bottom anymore. But that also goes with having fights that are primarily cleave too. So
Right. Is there anything else that you kind of want to speak to on behalf of the Ret spec before we call it there?
yeah, I just want to say I've seen a lot of people posting in a Discord about my guild won't give me the first tiny abomination in jar, and I gotta say that's shameful. Okay, if you're a guild out there and you're not considering giving your Ret the first one, if it's normal or heroic, doesn't matter. You're like actually hindering your own guild's progress. Like it's that big of a deal. So give your Rets the trinket, the first one, doesn't matter which one it is, give it to them, and you're gonna have like so much more raid DPS for your progression. Like it's actually such a big deal that you're hindering your raid's progression by not giving it to Red. So
damn. All right.
That's all I'll say for that. It's literally better than Shadowmourne, like once it finally scales up the whole way. So
really,
it's like a legendary. Yeah, for sure.
Damn, that's crazy. All right, Ret's got a lot of good things going for them this phase, though. So that's if you're a Ret, yeah, you'd be pretty excited. At least I would be. So
yeah, absolutely. Especially if the taunt glyph stays, which I think it's going to. We're gonna be feeling really good.
hell yeah, Surveillant. All right, man. I think that's it. Unless you have anything else you want to add.
Nah, just thanks for having me on.
Word. Appreciate your time, man. I'll see you around.
Hey,
Yo.
how's it going, man?
Going well, dude. Pants, thanks for running it back. Round 2.
I have so many disclaimers to put out for this, by the way.
All right, dude. I can't wait to hear it.
Well, talking about mages and their sets. I am not a mage theory crafter. I'm not even like, I wouldn't even consider myself like a hardcore mage player. I have mage alts and I know how to use a sim. That's like my background and my qualifications for this. So I want this to be like when you hear about like the medications on TV and they give you all these disclaimers on why you shouldn't use this product. That's me right now for talking about mages.
Awesome, dude. And I put you in this role anyways. Okay, love that. I can't wait for all of the comments for people that skipped specifically that part of the VOD and only see where you place the mages. That's gonna be great.
And they're just like, who the fuck is this guy?
You know the drill. You've been here before. Let me just share my screen so you can see what the
sure
list looks like so far. You were the first person to make a ranking and now also the last person. So
all right, so mage it's kind of insane. So when I talked about shadow, I was like, oh, shadow's really good because the 2-piece is like fine. The 4-piece gives about like 1200 DPS, and I was like, oh, that's gas tier. That's insane because it puts shadow on the map for single target. Depending on like what fight length you sim, it's possible that both of the 2-piece and the 4-piece give like 1000 DPS each. Wow. So like the 2-piece and the 4-piece are like, this is automatically gas tier. It's probably like the highest, like the top set you have, honestly. So okay, let's talk about the 2-piece. I'm like just kind of talking about it overall. The 2-piece, every time you get like a hot streak proc or the arcane missile thing, I forget what it's called. But you get a 12% haste buff. And as fire, you're going to be getting that an insane amount. To the point where you basically have 75% uptime on it in full bis.
Wow.
And that's just going to feel so good as a fire mage. I would say my biggest complaint as somebody who again plays mage casually is that fireball feels like it's just a long cast relative to other casters. And the fact that you're basically gonna have 12% haste for 75-80% of a fight, I think is just gonna feel really good. So it's one of those things that's incredibly strong. I think it's around 800 to 1000 DPS when I checked on my simming. So I did 2 sets of sims, one on 2.5 minutes and one on 4 minutes. And the 4 minutes is more for the 4-piece, and I'll talk about that when we get there. But
sure.
The 2-piece is like pretty consistent because it's every time you do a hot streak, which again you're gonna have like, I don't know, it's like 80-90% crit on your fire spells. So like it's actually just it's really goated in terms of how strong that bonus is. And then the 4-piece is, it basically turns your mirror image into a DPS cooldown. So when you use mirror images, you get 18% damage for 30 seconds. So in your opener, it's going to be insane. The funny thing is, this is something where I don't know if it does change your gameplay in the fact that mirror image becomes a DPS cooldown, and I'm sure that feels really good. But like I think mirror image was a kind of a DPS, a pseudo DPS cooldown, and then it was also nice to reduce threat. But like that 18% damage is going to be insanely good on your opener. And what's funny is you're not going to have any threat on the threat meter because of mirror image. It just hides your threat even though you're still generating it. So it's going to be really funny after 30 seconds when they disappear. And you just have a mage at like 95% of the tank's threat. And you're just like, what the fuck? Where did this come from?
Okay. Interesting.
And the thing about this ability is that it really depends. The strength depends on the fight length. So a 2.5 minutes or like a 3-minute fight is pretty much the worst it could be because mirror image is a 3-minute cooldown.
Okay.
So if you have a fight that's like super short or like 3.5 minutes, that's the ideal length.
Yep.
So this ability can be, again, it's 18% damage. It can be anywhere from like, I think my best sim showed it as around a 1500 DPS increase, and my worst sim showed it around 700. Both are still incredible.
That's
which means
a
like
lot.
the 2-piece and the 4-piece combined are like an easy 2000 DPS, like even in not the most ideal conditions.
That's by far a lot of DPS.
So, and the thing is, fire mages already, and I mean, maybe this is why they're one of the highest, I mean, if not the highest scaling spec in ICC. So it's like the fact that they also have this insane tier bonus is just, it's really unfair to every other caster. Well, I mean, every other DPS, but it makes me a little bit envious as a Shadow Priest main. It's insanely strong, I don't know that they needed this, but there's always that Blizzard bias towards mages.
I know looking at the set bonuses with, 12% haste and 18% additional damage, that just, with how hard mages scale, those set bonuses also just enable that scaling, right? Like there's no upper limit on kind of what is being scaled with their kind of rotation, damage profile, etc. I know for like some classes on the tier list, some of the set bonuses don't apply to like their entire damage profile, but both the 2 and the 4 set is just like enables all of their damage, which is very strong for sure.
Yeah, and I've only talked about fire. I did do sims for like FFB and arcane as well. And I mean, for FFB, it's very similar numbers. I think it's a little bit lower. And arcane, it's surprising. It seems to be like a pretty strong spec. Like it's obviously not as good as fire, but it seems to like not fall off super hard. And it still does, like at least in my sims, it was comparable to Affliction and Shadow Priest in full phase 3 bis, or I'm sorry, phase 4 bis. And the tier sets were really good. So, it was maybe like 700 to 800 DPS per tier bonus. So I think even in like the lower scaling specs, obviously Frost doesn't count as a real spec. But in like FFB and Arcane, it seems to still be, just as strong, if not slightly worse, but, still really good.
Okay, so Hans, looking at this tier set ranking, the way you described fire, it's very good. Do you think it's good enough to the point that you would put it a tier above gas?
A tier above gas. Give it its own tier. Oh my god. Can you imagine? I'm the guy who already put Shadow Priest at the top. And
okay, all right, wait 1 second. Wait, yeah, maybe let's not do that.
You're setting me up for so much backlash in the community. I mean, maybe good backlash. I don't know. Maybe people disagree with my assessment. I think it's definitely above Shadow. Like, I think it's the highest one here for sure.
Okay.
I don't know if it gets a tier of its own. I mean, I think Fire Mage is already kind of in a tier of its own in terms versus other range DPS. I think there are melee that are close, right? Fury Warriors fairly close, Feral's fairly close in terms of like overall DPS. Not talking tier sets.
Yeah.
I don't know if I have the authority in the Mage community to make that judgment.
All right. That's all good. We know Fire Mage is strong, and this has been something that's spoken on by just about everyone I've talked to that's mentioned Fire Mage as a comparison. So. I'm pretty happy putting it up in gas. You mentioned Arcane also performs quite well. The set bonuses do quite well for it. Do you think you're feeling gas up about that one, or are you just feeling good?
So Arcane, it was around 840 DPS for the 2-piece and 800 DPS for the 4-piece, if I said that right. So 1600-ish overall. And I mean, the Shadow Priest one was 1400 overall. So it's like, how does it not go above gas? Like, or above Shadow Priest and gas? That's like my thing. I think maybe the difference is that people already understand Arcane's strengths and weaknesses, like a really strong burst class falls off the longer the fight goes. Shadow, I think the tier set is what enables it to be a top tier single target spec. But without the tier set, that doesn't happen, despite its good scaling.
Yep.
So I don't know that this changes. I mean, it makes Arcane even more bursty, right? Like you have a 30-second cooldown with 18% increased damage. So that first 30 seconds is going to be ridiculous.
Right.
I think it has to be up there.
Sure.
Frost, I'll be honest, I didn't do any Frost simming. I did a phase 4 bis, and it came out to be 11k DPS, and I was like, yep, nope, not worth the effort.
All right. Well, I mean, we have Frost on here for the sake of completion. If you had to eeny, miny, moe it, where would you put it?
I mean, I'm sure the set is still probably pretty good for Frost. I don't know. I go to because like,
okay.
I think my thought is if you're playing Frost, you're already a different kind of player than like the person who's min-maxing everything. So it's like, I don't want to put your hopes up by saying it's a gas tier set, which it is. But it's like you're playing Frost. So like I don't know that that's necessarily what you care about.
Sure.
So I think it's because it's like, is it a DPS you can play in a raid? Sure. Is it going to be what people are looking for? No. Could you potentially get kicked for playing Frost? Probably. But if that's what you want to do, who am I to stop you?
Yeah. For the maybe 1 or 2 Frost enjoyers that might be watching this video, your tier set, your tier set bonus is pretty good. I would encourage you to play other things, but I mean, hey, live your life. And
yeah,
you're at least above the unholy DKs.
Oh man, yeah. I mean, they're in shambles. It feels pretty bad going from like the top DPS spec to literally the worst.
Yeah. One thing I'll add too is I know this tier set, this ranking, it's not necessarily ordered from left to right, just because there's so much.
I see. Okay.
Variation between the
For
specs,
sure.
but based on what you've said, I don't mind just squeezing mages. The top 2 spots here, the left 2 spots, even though it doesn't really mean anything. We just put them there anyways.
If you play mage, you should be extremely happy. You probably already are. And yeah, I think they're gonna blast, and I'm sad that I'm not a mage main.
All right, hell yeah, Pants. Anything else you want to add to this before we end there?
No, hopefully the mage community doesn't come after me too hard. I gave you the disclaimers in the beginning. If you didn't listen, go back and listen to it. I am not an expert.
All right, and I'll be sure to edit those disclaimers out so that you receive all the flack possible.
Yes, everybody's just like, who is this guy? He claims to be the best.
Yeah.
Should they just put my voice into an AI thing?
Oh my god, dude! I should have done that. Oh, it would have been hilarious. All right, man. I won't take up too much or any more of your time, man. I appreciate you stepping in here, and happy Gamma dungeon grinding.
All right, cool. Thanks, you too, man. See you.
Yeah, peace. And also, to go back to another thing that you brought up for DPS values and comparisons between what I have on this sheet right now. So some of the class people or class reps I reached out to provided DPS values. I know, for example, Shadow Priest, that is one of the first people I met with, top of the gas here right now. These aren't really ordered in any particular order, aside from being in the unique rows. I think their 2 set was about 200 DPS, and their 4 set was 1200 DPS. So Shadow Priest is crazy high.
Now, is that the bonus only or the bonus plus the stats? That's something you want to be careful about, because not every spec is consistent about how they quantify tier, right?
Yeah. So in as Pantsface was describing to me, that is the set bonus exclusively. However, I didn't get values from everyone because there is how you've kind of determined that information. There's no kind of baseline that we had everyone sim to or sim for. So I think the only other class that gave me some numbers were hunters, and they were about 400 DPS, 4 set, 200, 2 set, or something in that along those lines, if I remember correctly. So if you're thinking about where you want to slot in ferals on this tier list, can definitely weigh in the DPS contribution from the tier set bonus, but a lot of class leads tended to stay away from that for the reason that you just brought up. There's a lot of context for different classes that would kind of influence that number, and also how you're actually looking for that value. So
yeah, exactly. So I know the way we do it is kind of nice, because I've been maintaining almost everyone uses WoW Sims, right, for simming now for almost all classes. It's a nice kind of universal tool that has similar assumptions. There, it's kind of difficult to get this exact piece of information, because you can't just say turn off the bonus, right? You have to. So the way you would do it there, and the way some people have done it, it's a little tedious, but basically you would remove the pieces and then manually add the stats back to get the exact same passive stats you would have had with the 4 or the 2 pieces equipped, and then resim, and then that should give you the value from just the bonus. For us, it was a little lucky, because I've always maintained a standalone sim. That's what I first initially developed before we ported it to WoW Sims, and we ended up maintaining it on the side as more of a theory crafting tool. The UI sucks. It's not something I tell people to actually use for their own gear. We just use it for stuff like this. And there, it's kind of nice, because I just have check boxes for all the bonuses, because it's just something I hacked together myself, so I can just literally have the same stats and just uncheck the bonus, and it's very easy to get these values. But yeah, it is something to be careful about when looking at these numbers. And then of course there's the general thing of even if everyone is doing the simming in the same way, different sims have different sources of error and different applicability to how close is a real player going to actually be to realize these bonuses, and that's a little trickier. For Feral, I will say that like those aspects should be pretty close, right? Because these are not bonuses that are like hard to get value out of.
Yeah.
You're more or less just playing the spec the same way. Obviously, it'll feel a little bit different, like I was mentioning with the different energy balance a little bit. But more or less, if you're good at Feral, you're not going to be doing much different. And the bonuses like mechanics and stuff don't really impact the values of these bonuses because we're an energy pooling spec. So Feral tends to do pretty well in general in like realizing sim values in practice on single target fights, right? Like let's not talk about cleave and stuff like that. But
Okay.
on a single target fight, yeah, these values are often pretty close to what you'll actually see.
And comment, you probably heard me laugh when you brought up the WoW Sims way to find the tier set bonus damage through WoW Sims, like, and how tedious that is. I laughed because that's exactly what I did for tier GC for every single DPS deck.
Yep.
And I ran into some of my own issues with that. And there are some things like, okay, if this class runs tier gloves in their 4-set BIS, if you remove tier gloves with hyperspeed accelerators, how do you refactor that back into the sim? So there were kind of like a lot of weird edge cases that I didn't really know how to work around or how to kind of like wiggle my way through. And so I guess the idea, and rather than kind of have or try to have a consistent method across the board for every class, I thought there was kind of more value in reaching out to people that are a lot more knowledgeable about their class, and there will be some variation with maybe what numbers they return, if they return numbers at all. But at the end of the day, this is just kind of like, how are you feeling about your spec or your 2-set bonus going into ICC? And
yeah, as another kind of cautionary note on that, I ran into an error when I first tried to quantify this, just to highlight how tricky it is to do this sometimes. Because the first number I got for the 4-piece was even higher. I was getting, what was my number? Almost 1200 DPS, even higher, and I was blown away. And then I realized that the reason is actually something subtle, and it comes down to what I was telling you earlier, which is that without this bonus, you don't even cast Rake. Like, you just don't cast it. It's not worth casting. And the sim is smart enough to do that. Like, we've coded it so it actually looks at the damage per energy. And if you're in like full gas ICC armor penetration gear, it's just not going to cast it if you don't have the bonus.
Mm-hmm.
But the BIS idol for the phase is a Rake proc idol. Right, it builds agility stacks over time as your Rake ticks. And the idol itself is not amazing. It's only a very minor upgrade over our phase 3 idol, which is a shred proc idol.
Mm-hmm.
But understandably, if all you do is uncheck the bonus, now all of a sudden you're not only seeing the value of the 4-piece bonus, you're also adding on to that the value of the idol slot, because you're just not getting any procs. So I had to fix that. I had to correct for it. I had to put back in the phase 3 idol, which is what you'd use if you were running some weird ICC gear set without 4-piece, right?
Yeah.
And then you get it's still very high, but a more accurate, realistic number. So yeah, there's a lot of nuances that come into play to do this correctly.
For sure. And so we've kind of NerdEggHead, we've kind of gone a little bit off topic here with like the Feral discussion, but actually like this specific discussion about simming these values, or trying to come up with specifically values for the set bonuses. I had an idea as I was talking with you here about like, would you be cool if I included this maybe at like the end of the video as like a little kind of sim discussion regarding the difficulties or the kind of nuances in finding these sim values? Because I'm sure this might be a question viewers have, because it has been fairly inconsistent across the like class leads. Yep. Some people have provided numbers, some people haven't. And like, I feel adding some insight would be like super valuable if you're cool with it, of course.
No, definitely go for it. I think that if anything might be one of the more valuable takeaways for people, right?
100%.
Yeah, because people tend to, I think sims are super cool. I work on them a lot and they're valuable and they help you think about the game differently, but you have to be careful when you use them. And people oftentimes take the results at face value without not thinking carefully about all of the pitfalls that can come by, right?
Mm-hmm. All right, that's it. If you're still here, thanks for watching. Consider dropping a like and subscribing. Really helps me out. This was a huge project. It was a lot of fun to take on, though, meeting with all the different various class leads and kind of class experts. So, hope you found something valuable from this video. Maybe you learned a thing or two. And I'll see you in the next one. Peace.